Take power if something happens. Silence followed as Thomas finished. What he had said pointed to only one thing, foreshadowing the future. For Charlotte to take power, at least 10 years would need to pass, and for her to take power at all, James would need to die. Not just James, but the entire Bellini family. From Hector to Bella to Ferrucci to Sophia, every single one of them would need to disappear from the face of the earth for Charlotte to take power, to give her the right to lead the family. Not just that, but if James were to die somehow, the whole thing would collapse. One thing was certain, Hector wouldn't sit idly by, and even if he died, the others would avenge him. The entire empire could crumble. Why do we even talk about all of this? Benjamin's voice came as he joined them. We successfully pulled off the biggest operation in history. It took thousands, a joint effort of all the agencies. We closed the borders, eliminated hundreds of them, arrested, cleaned out, and removed the rest. We seized huge amounts of drugs, money, weapons, chemicals, and now we're talking about a future we don't know shit about. He paused, eyeing Linda. We're talking about the death of the person this whole thing is built on, the person everything depends on. That's the worst thing we can do. Benjamin was right. They were talking about something that would be the worst possible scenario for all of this. If James were to die, the whole thing would come crashing down and on. Top of that, he was a Bellini too, and hearing them discuss it only angered him. And it was genuinely dumb, a dumbass situation. James had just come back, and the first thing they talked about was his death and his liabilities, as if the whole fucking foundation wasn't already built. As if all they didn't need to do now was comply and do what James wanted. It was fucking outrageous. True, Stephen spoke. We're talking about the wrong thing here. What we need to focus on is the future and our plan, rather than imagining him already dead. That's the worst thing we can do. But since he's been gone, all we've done is focus on the operation and its aftermath. What do we want from him, though? How much of a cut? What do we allow him to do? We already talked about it, and he knows it. You are wrong, Linda. Benjamin interrupted her. That was the past. Since then, he went to Marassi, met with Darvik, and there's no doubt he made a deal with him. A faint smile appeared on his face. We might have made deals with him before, but those deals no longer exist in his mind, and we all know it. This operation puts so much under our control that we can make fucking billions. The chemicals, the equipment, it's all there for him. So when he comes to meet us, that's when we'll show him what we have, and what we can build together. Linda knew it, just like everybody else. The whole operation came with something else attached to it, that all the deals they had made, all the future they had planned, no longer existed. They hadn't truly believed it would actually happen. That they would wipe out everyone in the capital, leaving only James standing. That they would seize equipment, warehouses, land, houses, hangars from those criminals' assets that could all be repurposed for James. That the sheer amount of chemicals alone would be enough to poison an entire country. With all of this, they could become a narco-state, a government-funded narco-state where billions would flow in. And they did it. They actually pulled it off. Now the plan was to go after the whole fucking country, every street, every city. An operation aimed not just at becoming a narco-state, but a narco-country. The epicenter of the drug trade on the continent, and James had been given everything. It is almost impossible to truly grasp how vast it all is. There is the port with cargo ships that can transport drugs without a single problem. Then the airport, which James can use to ship products across the entire continent. All of it perfectly legal. The planes and ships are under companies controlled by the government itself, and everything operates within the law. James only has to package the drugs and hand them over for others to sell. Yet all of it relies on one crucial thing, a production line, the largest the country has ever seen, capable of supplying everything. In short, narco factories. Not like Marassi, where only the money flows in, a country that keeps gangsters, drug lords, arms dealers, and others clean, their money usable and protected, but a place that becomes something else entirely. A country that produces drugs and sells them like fucking candy, flooding the entire continent. Chapter 379, Strange Feeling. So everybody was ready. Or well, at least Ramirez thought that everybody was ready to make the deal, to count the profit, the loss, the minimum and maximum, as 5 hours had already passed since they arrived at the house. But there was nothing close to it as he stepped into the house. No, it was the straight opposite of it actually. Sleeping. Ramirez's voice came as he was kinda confused about what was happening, as James was snoring like a fucking tiger was let free in the house, while on the other side Charlotte was happily painting the walls of the living room pink and green, even getting it on as some of the fine marbles, and Hector himself was playing some game on his phone. Like, it seemed a bit chill to him, and what made it more absurd to him was that he just saw Bella mopping up the foyer. It all was like if he was hallucinating, or he was drugged up or something. It seemed like a family that is about to divorce or something. Like James the father sleeping after long hours of work, Bella the mother in her own depression and pain just washing the dishes, not even caring about their daughter Charlotte, who is painting on the thousands of dollars worth marble, and of course Hector the weird uncle who is playing a pool game. A strange family, though it was much stranger that this is the fucking core of the Bellini family. That the Don, the drug lord of the country, is snoring, sleeping like nothing is happening, while the underboss is playing the pool game and his girlfriend, and also a key member of the family, is dishwashing. Like if everybody forgot who they are and what they need to do, what position they hold, that they are the number one, those who should already set the direction. But no, for a week nothing has happened, just bloodshed and some restructuring. Ramirez witnessed it all, how Hector was shooting people dead, shit. Even himself was shooting people as they needed to do it. Like Ramirez thought that when James comes back everything will be done in a day, he will be all in form, running up and down to make deals and so on. But no, just sleeping and Hector chilling out. And it actually showed how much power they held. Yeah, as Ramirez watched it all, he knew that this is power. Power that they can chill out, that they don't need to run up and down, that James can dictate the pace. Not just can, but he actually does. The only one who can make the government wait for him. The only person who dictates the pace for them. That is motherfucking power. Though it was still strange to him as Hector didn't even hear his questions as he was focused on that pool game. Fuck. Hector's voice came low, as a whisper, careful not to wake James up. I lost 10,000 to this fucker, he said as he stood up, cracking his neck, and just noticed Charlotte too. Just looking at her painting over the marble, though at least she added some color to the house itself. What's good, Ramirez? I didn't even notice you, Hector said as he turned toward the door, and there he was. I've been here for the last 5 minutes, just standing and trying to solve what is happening, he said straightforward and even looked confused. By what? Hector asked as he looked back, and to him he saw nothing strange. I don't know, it feels a bit like a family going through a divorce, Ramirez said, glancing at Hector. Well, kinda yeah, but it's the first day and everyone's jet-lagged, and I don't blame James. We still have to go through everything, the hours, the amounts, how much, how many, the salaries, the people, and so on. That's going to be torture. I bet that, Ramirez answered as they actually tried it. They know the exact amount of white magic they have, but the pricing is just hard to decide what they need to sell it for, as they are the only ones. Not just that, but the buyers are all scared to shit after the whole operation happened. And of course there is the fact that half of the connection dipped, being scared by all of it. Even 14 workers from the family ran away as they thought they were going to be busted, though at least it was a good test. Those left who are motherfuckers and would have been traitor. And nothing more. Well, I should wake him up th. Actually wait. Ramirez spoke, kinda pulling back Hector as he was ready to go to James. What? Something happened. He looked back as Ramirez seemed a little off with his eyes and facial expression. Buck is outside. I think it would be better to talk with him first, and then wake up James, because if something is wrong about the girl, then we need to act. Well, let's hope Ferrucci picked a good one, Hector said, catching the worry in Ramirez's eyes, because killing Ferrucci's girlfriend and then waking him up to tell him about it would be anything but a good feeling. So with that, Hector stepped out of the house, heading toward Buck, who stood off to the side, looking like a detective in a fedora, his raincoat all black, a cigarette hanging from his mouth. What up, Buck? Oh, Hector, how good to see you face to face again, he said as he shook his head. It would be better to get me to this house than sitting all day with Danny. Nah, you good there, just waiting to be activated. Like a robot, huh? Buck asked back, puffing out the smoke. Though I've been activated by you, and I looked after the woman. And what did you find? Hector asked, and in that moment he got worried, his mind filling with hundreds of fucked up possibilities about what that girl could be. She's as clear as the summer sky, Buck said with a smile. Clean record, Never arrested, not even a ticket. She graduated high school and college, and since then she's been working as the manager of the 43rd Street Postal Office. Her family is clean too. No records, nothing wrong. That's good. Hector let out a long sigh and even closed his eyes as the stress finally left him. He'd been worrying about it ever since he met her. But how the fuck did he meet her? I can't even imagine it. Ferrucci's apartment is a block away from hers, and I saw a photo on the fridge. They probably met at a restaurant where Ferrucci usually eats when he's home. Safe to say it played out normally. He asked her out. She said yes. Nothing special. Or maybe they met on a dating app. Buck explained. That would be the most absurd. Wait, you said you saw a photo on a fridge? Hector asked as he got kinda confused, which Buck just smiled. Yeah, I broke into her apartment to see if there is any device, that she might be a Fed or a spy or something, but nothing. I tested it with detectors, and not a single sign of them. Though it is cozy, and dozens of Ferrucci's suits and clothes are there. Buck said it so casually that it seemed not even strange, just his work of breaking in with fucking detectors and sweeping through the whole house. Though at least it was cleared too. Well then she is clear. Yeah, she is clear, but to be sure I will follow her a bit to see if there is something out of the ordinary, if you want me. That would be great, just to make 100% sure. Hector said, tapping Buck's shoulder. Then see you soon, and if something serious happens, call me, okay? Yes sir, yes. Buck joked as he left, while Hector headed back into the house to finally wake James up and do what they needed to do. Make some deals. Chapter 380, Dawn. James, wake up. Hector's voice came as he started poking James's side. But it didn't really work, and to be honest, Hector didn't want to be the one waking him up, so he went with the next plan. Charlotte, wake your dad up. He said, and Charlotte was already looking at them. And well, he didn't need to say it twice. She stood up from the ground, got into position, and took off like a pro runner, sprinting straight toward the couch before jumping right onto James, and that woke him up for sure. What the fuck? Wake up. Charlotte's voice came again as she cupped James's face with her hands and started shaking him. I am up. James's tired, half-awake voice came as he grabbed Charlotte and stopped her, her shaking feeling like it was rattling his entire mind inside his skull. Through his blurry vision, all he could see was Hector and Ramirez sitting off to the side, watching, and on the other side, Bella, with a smile on her face. She looked like she was enjoying it, the torture of being woken up from a good dream by a kid shaking the shit out of you. Not just that, but it actually hurt when she jumped on him. Yeah, Bella was enjoying every bit of it. We need to have the meeting, James. Hector said as he sat down on the end of the couch. We need to calculate and plan everything out before meeting with Linda. He looked straight at him. We need everything to be set and ready. James didn't even answer. He was still stuck in a half-dream state, and just hearing the word calculate sent him into despair. All he wanted was to sleep, even though it had been his own idea to do it at night. Plans, he said halfway as he yawned big, and at the same time started tickling Charlotte as she was still on him, and her little giggle and laugh just woke him up even more. But we need everybody, don't we? He stopped tickling Charlotte and looked at Hector. I already notified everybody to come here, so it will take around half an hour so you can get ready. Hector said, and indeed he did. Called up everybody who held a higher position in the family, from the warehouse managers, from the smuggler operations, even called up Danny, and well, literally everybody who needed to be here and hear what they were going to do. And well, it was an operation itself. Not the calling up to come, because it was obvious, but that everybody who had their hand in the family business, the high-ranking ones from operation to the production line, to the warehouse, to the money handling, everybody did their own job while James was away. They recounted everything they had. A whole operation was set up to claim the warehouses they could, the ones that belonged to Lucian. Yeah, claiming every single property of Lucian was fucking hard. There were some obvious warehouses everybody knew about, but the others, nobody knew where they were, so it turned into a literal hunt to find them. And when they did, they had to count what was available, what was left. They did the same with Silas's property too, at least the parts the government left them. And then Danny had the biggest workload and meltdown out of everyone. He fucking needed to put together a crisis plan because of the money, because so much came in and so much went out. Profit and loss were in a constant fucking fight with each other. And he was the one, along with his people, who had to make everything look right. But it was hard. Paying out people who got injured, paying the salaries that James had raised, then counting the amount of cash James took out, then the money he gave to Finn to start the production line, but that money wasn't used because Finn got fucked up. Then counting the losses that the fuckers stole, and then counting what they got from Lucian and Silas. Well, it was all a shithole for him. Not even talking about the fight that took place on Marco's property, the amount of bullets they used, and the cost of it, was a lot. Danny was the most hard-working one since everything happened, along with his little squad. He had some meltdowns, some crash-outs, but he managed to handle it, like gluing everything together and making sense of it. In short, everything was fucked, and they truly needed well-made plans and coherent thinking to make everything right. It will take hours, huh? James asked again as he sat down and placed Charlotte on the ground. Yeah, it'll take a few hours for sure, so it's better to freshen yourself up and be ready, Hector said as he stood up. Until then, I'll go up to your office and make space for everybody. We should order some food too, like pizza or hamburgers. Bella, can you order some? James asked as he looked at her. She still had that attitude as she looked back at him. I can, but how much should I buy? How many people are coming? She glanced at Hector. With us, there will be 8 people. Hector answered Bella before heading up the stairs to James's office. Maybe it was a bad idea to sleep. I feel like a zombie, James thought as he was tired as fuck, his whole body feeling like it had been beaten to hell. But at least he knew he was alive. And he also knew the pain would be much worse. Hearing the numbers and calculating them would cause the most pain, but it needed to be done. He needed to be the Don. But first he needed to look presentable, because during his stay in Marassi he hadn't really cared about himself. His beard had grown out a bit, and even his hair looked like a bird's nest. So after a shower, he took care of it. He shaved his beard and, well, cut his hair too, and it actually came out good. He looked fresh, looked ready, and indeed, he was ready. Ready to be the Don. Chapter 381, The Chaos Bringer. Numbers. I hate numbers, James thought as he put on another black suit, as he already knew that everyone would arrive dressed properly, like a real family attending a real meeting, and he was right. This was the first meeting in the family's history when everyone of higher rank was invited to sit down and discuss the most serious matter of the business: money, production, the future. A meeting like this wasn't just formal, it was symbolic. And truthfully, everyone who was invited felt respected, because it meant they were not merely part of the family, but important individuals trusted by James, the Don. So everyone brought out their best suits for the meeting. Even Hector changed properly. Even Ramirez did, something that almost never happened before, as he usually preferred loose, military-style clothing instead of a proper suit. Still, even that alone showed just how serious this meeting was. James, however, was already tired of it before it even began. Before everyone arrived, he stood in front of the mirror, staring at himself. The way he stood, the cane in his hand, his entire presence. He looked different. He looked like he had aged 10 years from everything that had happened. His face was wrinkled, dark bags under his eyes, his whole being resembling a ghost. I made a deal with Carmelo before even knowing what the fuck was going on. Then with Damien. Darvik needs money too, and so does the government. The weight of it finally began to catch up to him. A constant, overwhelming flood of business. The relentless pull of it all, especially the money side of the family. He remembered Danny saying they were on the edge of going broke, and the reason was Dennis and that fucking war that destroyed the camps and the production lines. Since then, there hadn't been any real profit. A long war had broken out with the cartel, inside the circle, and with the police too. Everything went to shit. Money drained fast, salaries, funerals, benefits, new business ventures meant to save them. Even without massive cash reserves left to their name, there was still something else pressing down on him. We need to liquidate. James, everybody's here. Hector's voice came through the door. I'm coming. James shook his head slightly, gave the mirror one last tired glance, and let it all go. He wasn't a money man. There were people in the family far smarter than him when it came to numbers. So he opened the door, stepped out, and walked toward the office with Hector. And there they were. The moment the door opened, the room changed. It was like a king returning to his seat. Everyone was already in the office, gathered around the table, some standing, some leaning, some mid-conversation, but the second James stepped in, every voice died. They just turned and looked at him as James stood in the doorway, calm, composed, like he had never left in the first place. He didn't say a word, and he didn't need to. The silence spoke for him. For those who hadn't seen him in a long time, it felt like seeing the real Dawn, not a name, not a rumor, but the man himself. The one whose decisions decided who stayed breathing and who didn't. He didn't rush inside, didn't look surprised, didn't react to their stares. He just stood there, eyes moving slowly across the room, acknowledging everyone without greeting a single one of them. That was enough. The cane rested in his hand, untouched, more a symbol than a necessity. The way he held himself, the way he looked at them, made it clear this wasn't a meeting anymore. This was his return, and the beginning of something far bigger than they had ever imagined would happen. I hate this silence, James thought. To him, the quiet was unbearable, embarrassing, even. No one was saying a word, they were just staring at him. Still, he noticed something strange, something that stood out. The only ones who didn't really give a fuck were Bella and Ramirez. They stood there simply because everyone else did. The others, Danny, Basai, Civi, and Jordan, were clearly intimidated by him. Danny had seen him recently, sure, but the other three hadn't. They hadn't seen James in months, and now, looking at him, it was crazy to say the least. He had completely changed, but that wasn't what James found strange. "Where is Sophia?" he asked, turning his gaze to Hector beside him. "She's taking care of her own family first, but she'll come tomorrow so we can tell her our plans." Hector answered, and yeah, Sophia was securing her family, tying them closer to the Bellini family so they could work together more directly. "Huh. Well then, let's begin," James said as he slowly walked to the head of the table and sat down. The atmosphere was still off. This wasn't the feeling of friends sitting together, it was pressure as if something was wrong. So he asked the golden question. "Danny," James began looking straight at him, "are we broke?" The question itself was almost funny. Funny in a room filled with tension, where they were deciding the family's future, where the plans made in this moment would shape their lives. And James opened it all with that question. No," Danny said, meeting James's eyes. "Considering what we have and what will be coming in, we'll be billionaires in no time. We'll be swimming in money." "Swimming in money," James whispered, but somehow it didn't make him feel any better. He was tired as fuck, his head hurt as well as his whole body. He didn't react to it with shock or surprise, more like nothing. Money was never really the point for him. Yeah, money dictated, money spoke, money was a weapon on its own, but money was also the bringer of chaos. And he knew, just like everybody else in the room, that once the money started coming in, hundreds of millions or billions, shit would come with it too. But that's what the mafia was about: money, influence, power, and all the chaos. And cash that came with it. And James had already seen all of it, so he was ready to take on more. Much more. Then let's begin. Chapter 382. Feel the weight. First, Hector began. "I would say that the most impactful aspect we need to focus on is the reform the family has to go through. We need to restructure the family in a way that allows us to move more freely, faster, and with far greater efficiency," he continued. "Of course, the distribution and smuggling sides of the operation must function flawlessly as well. The very first and most important aspect of all of this, the very first point that had to be addressed, was the foundation itself. That was exactly why those people had to be involved, the ones who held higher ranks, the ones who had seen the operation from the inside. From smuggling to selling, from setting the prices to reclaiming the proceeds and moving them back into the warehouses, every single step had to be understood and controlled by people who truly knew how the system worked. This was far more important than the reform itself. Without a hierarchy that functioned properly, without procedures that governed the movement and handling of drugs, nothing could work on the family level, let alone on a larger scale. Chaos at the top would inevitably poison everything below it. Order was not optional, it was the backbone of survival. Money, supply, distribution, protection, enforcement, each of these elements depended on the other. If even one part failed, the entire structure would begin to collapse. That was why experience mattered more than ideals, and why authority had to come from those who had already walked through every stage of the operation. They were the ones who knew how to keep the machine running smoothly, finely tuned, and efficient, no matter the pressure placed upon it. In the end, It was not loyalty, fear, or ambition that held everything together. It was a structure, and if the structure was broken, it could not be repaired by good intentions alone. That truth had already been proven right when Hector and Ramsar responded to the fractured system in the only way they knew would work, by killing those who had been involved. But the hierarchy is already set, isn't it? Danny said, turning to Hector. Everyone knows that James is the head of the Bellinis. After him, it flows down to you, then the Ferrucci Bella, and from there to the other leaders, people like me, Ramazur, Basai, Civi, Jordan, Finn, and then further down to the group leaders and the rest. I meant the... No, James interrupted calmly, cutting Hector off before he could finish. In the past months, James continued, his voice low and controlled, that link has weakened. He was sitting in that leather chair as if it were a throne, completely at ease. The ring on his finger caught the light as his hand rested against the armrest, and the way he carried himself was something else entirely. It was like a dawn pulled straight from a movie, except there was nothing fictional about the power he held. We don't just need a hierarchy that gives orders, he continued. We need one that enforces loyalty and, more importantly, protects the family. If it had been tighter, James rats like Xavier and his little group wouldn't have survived a single day. So first I want to know how it was even possible for them to steal without being noticed. As James finished, he looked at Civi, Jordan, and Basai, the three men responsible for overseeing every warehouse, hangar, and single building that stored drugs. They were the ones who knew the system inside and out, the ones who saw every movement, every transfer, every number. So, how did it happen? For the three of them, it was an entirely different situation, an entirely different experience. They hadn't seen James in a very long time. The last time had been when Raphael was still alive, at the very beginning of everything, and even then they had barely spoken, exchanging only a few words. To them, James had always been something distant, something, more a presence than a person, but now, sitting across from him, it felt like stepping into something dark and unfamiliar. The way his question came wasn't really a question at all. It felt like a judgment that carried the weight of death. The way he held himself, the stillness, those eyes fixed on them without blinking. There was something monstrous in it. From everyone else's point of view, James was normal. They had worked with him, spoken to him, stood beside him long enough to understand him. But to someone who hadn't seen him in a long time, who had never truly known him, he felt like an entirely different person. The authority, the presence, the sheer pressure of his existence was overwhelming. His whole being was simply insane, terrifying. It was because of false reports, Danny said, knowing that for them, answering for the first time under James's gaze would not be easy. Xavier and his group submitted falsified records, and the warehouse overseers failed to verify whether those reports were true or not have already been dealt with. His eyes briefly flicked toward Ramsar, who was the one that killed them for not doing their work properly. And what happened after that was simple. The false numbers had made their way up the chain of command to Jordan, Basie, and Civi, and because the reports passed through multiple people, no one realized the strange numbers. I thought managers were supposed to check the numbers, James said calmly. This time, I will turn a blind eye to it. But next time, his gaze settled on the three of them. You will be replaced. They all knew exactly what that meant. James had forgiven them. For now, but one more mistake, and they would die. Maybe this is too much, but if they are this lame that they don't even check the numbers, why the fuck are they even employed by me? James thought, as he knew that. Threatening them was not the best idea, but it was necessary to do this. They needed to feel the weight, and well, they began to feel it very much. Chapter 383, Hierarchy. This meeting was supposed to be a business one, the kind that usually goes with numbers, plans, routes, but instead, it went in a completely different direction. James didn't start off with number nah, rather he threatened them, the three men who were basically overseeing and managing the drugs. It wasn't how this meeting was meant to go, though it still worked. Not just because of the threats itself, but because of what it meant. Loyalty wasn't something James asked for anymore. It was something he demanded. Everyone there understood that, though there was one more thing that made it even heavier. Everybody in the family knew what Ramirez and Hector had done. They knew they had hunted down and tortured a dozen members of the family after the whole Xavier incident, and, well, Some of them had already seen the video of Xavier being chopped up. Yeah, Hector, he thought that the video about Killian fucking chopping up Xavier's body with an axe would be a very good idea to send it to the people who held higher ranks, because it would put fear in them, the kind of fear that makes them understand the same thing would happen to them if they fucked up. So he did exactly that. That was also why everything felt so dark about James. Everybody there had seen the video, except James and Belland. Only Hector and Ramirez were the ones who didn't actually throw up right after watching it. Danny, Basai, Civi, and Jordan, they fucking vomited everything out of them. They felt sick for days, because they didn't just catch a glimpse of the video, they didn't look away halfway through. They were forced to watch the whole thing. Literally made to sit there and watch until the very end. It was bad. So bad that it messed them up on a completely different level. The kind of thing you don't forget. The kind of thing that stays in your head long after it's over, no matter how hard you try not to think about it. Even James himself knew that the atmosphere wasn't the best. Tension between the top members of the family could only go wrong if he pushed it too far, and he didn't even want to look menacing, to say the least. He was still tired, his head hurt, which made him look like that, but now he was ready to break the tension and start off with the meeting for real. So, where should we start first, the hierarchy? He asked. Yeah, we need to set up a real ranking system right now. The simple Bellini name doesn't make sense. Danny started looking at James. Up until now, the 4 Bellini men ranked highest to you: Ferrucci, Hans, Hector, and Bella. But now Hans is no longer with us. Ferrucci is at the hospital, and Bella? Danny stopped, glancing at her, unsure whether to say it out loud, but Bella spoke before he could. I am James's girlfriend and will be his fiancé, so take me off the list. I'm no longer part of the family the way I was, she said, and honestly, it wasn't surprising. Everybody knew she had feelings for James, and she had finally made her choice. Then the only 2 Bellinis by rank are you, Hector, and Ferrucci. Danny continued. I think it would be much better if we actually gave them proper ranks. That way, it would be easier to recognize who is who and to know exactly what they do. I agree. Hector joined in as Danny finished. We need proper ranks. He looked at James. I think it is obvious to everyone that Hector is the underboss, so that is right as it is. James began. But any suggestion to others, like all of you need to have ranks, Ferrucci and Finn too. I think for Danny, treasurer could be a good one. Ramser said, looking at him. He handles all the money and finances, and the title treasurer gives him a bit of command and authority in the family. For Basai, Civi, and Jordan, the manager rank would fit, they're important, and the title has meaning. Finn would stay as he is, the overseer of them, like a supervisor. He added, glancing back at James. Supervisor sounds like a supermarket position, James said, as he smiled a bit. What about a simple overseer? I mean, Finn is the one who is making the production and looking after the warehouse overall, so overseer would fit him well. Not just that, but in this way it is easy to understand. Civi, Jordan, and Basai are under Finn's command, who is the overseer over all production and storage. Danny is the treasurer of the family. Hector, you are the underboss, and you, Ramser, are the... He stopped, looking at him. Captain, maybe? I think that is good. Ramser spoke. I already established a rank system among the soldiers of the family, and the bodyguards too, so captain rank would be great, yeah. So the one who left is... Ferrucci, what should fit him well? James asked, and the silence said everything. There was not a single good one to give him. Like the torturer of the family under him is more torturer. Maybe he doesn't need a title. Danny said, everybody knows in the family what he does and how he does it. That was the truth, and well, it made sense. Good. Then the hierarchy is established. The only thing left is for everyone to organize their own groups and chain of command, but I think everybody already has it. James said, and indeed, everyone had their own hierarchy and chain of command in place. Most of it had been arranged by Hector, so there were no fuck-ups, or even if there were, it was easy to see how it happened and whose fault it was. Not to mention Ramirez, who had already created his own military rank system among the family soldiers. Though a question remained. You need one too. Ramirez began again. I think order and respect is the way to go. Everybody's calling you James or boss, which is fine to get closer to people, but in the end, there isn't much respect in it. In my opinion, there doesn't need to be one, James explained. If someone in the city or elsewhere calls me Don or something, that wouldn't be the best thing. It's much easier to communicate using my name or simply boss. But there was another meaning behind it. It made it easier to connect with people, to be down to earth even as a boss. At least here, in the family house, and where there's no public, people need to feel the change and call you by a respected name. Ramirez insisted as in his mind. It made sense. Adding a title to James would inspire more loyalty and add more weight. What should it be? James asked, looking at everyone, and there was only one title that truly fit him. Don is simple and carries weight, Hector said, and everyone in the room nodded in agreement. James said nothing, but a faint smile crossed his face. He knew that from this point on, he would no longer be just James or boss, but something else entirely. Don Bellini, head of the Bellini family. Chapter 384, Need to Change. Well, the beginning of the meeting went kind of easy, much easier than he had expected, and it was probably because he had never actually done anything himself, and he knew it was how it was going to continue. And it was a problem that could end in the worst way imaginable, one he was only just realizing. And it was Ramirez who had planted the thought in James's mind. He was the Don now, that was his title, and from that point on, everybody would refer to him as that. But it felt so distant and wrong because of one single reason. It was always Hector and the others who took care of all the details, who were building up the logistics, deciding on the warehouse locations, organizing supplies, and making sure every little piece of the plan fit together. They handled the entire setup while he only watched, nodded, or occasionally gave a quick word here or there. He is like a Don who rules everything without actually understanding how it works. He can sit back and make decisions without knowing the details of what happens behind the scenes. He does not need to learn every single step, and he does not have to be involved in every choice or action. Meanwhile, Hector, Ramazer, and everyone else in the room are the ones doing all the real work. They are the ones who build the entire system from the ground up. They arrange deliveries, track every item in the inventory, manage the workers, and handle every problem that comes up. They are the ones that are making sure everything runs smoothly while he only sees the results. Every important thing that needed to be built or fixed was handled by them, and they did it without waiting for him to tell them what to do. It was almost like he had created a machine that worked on its own, and he was the only person who could control it with just a word. How crazy is it to even think about? It all worked because of the way he handled things, because of the approach he had built over time. People in his organization are well paid, their families are taken care of, and even if something happens to them, their loved ones are looked after. Knowing that their families are always safe and supported gives them a sense of security and trust that goes far beyond normal loyalty. Their loyalty is on another level entirely. And at the same time, their boss, the one who controls all of this, often knows very little about how things actually work. It is almost absurd when you think about it. It is strange, almost unbelievable, that someone can have so much power and control without being involved in the details, without knowing every step, and yet still make everything work perfectly. James knows this, and he understands how extraordinary and dangerous it is at the same time. He knows very well that he has no choice but to learn all of it, because if he does not, it can lead to a complete disaster. And the reason is simple. James knows almost nothing about his own mafia, and on top of that he is not involved enough, which means that even loyal people can start to question things in their minds. What they see every day is Hector, not him, and slowly the idea can grow that James is only the Don in name, while Hector is the real leader, the one who moves everything, the one who thinks for everyone and controls the flow of power. And that single thought, once it takes root, can turn into disorder over time. James understands this very well, and he knew that if they ever reached a point where the power became too large, this problem would surface sooner or later, and now, in his head, it was happening right now. He trusts Hector, but this is not about his own trust. It is about the people's trust, because from their point of view James is almost an untouchable figure, someone distant and unreachable, someone many of them have never even met, while Hector is there in front of them, real, visible, and present, which only leads to one single solution. He needs to become a completely different kind of leader than the one he has been until now. Not someone who only gives orders, but someone who understands how everything truly works, from the smallest detail to the largest decision, and someone who is there, fully present, in every part of it. He needs to know where everything comes from and how it is made, how the production process starts and how it ends, who is involved at every step, how the packing is done, who handles it, and where it is stored. He needs to know the exact routes used to move the product, the names of the people running those routes, and who is hired to watch over them and keep them in line. He needs to know how many kilos are produced every single day, how much money flows in and out, what the profit and loss numbers look like. After that comes transport. Planes, trucks, ships. Which ones are used, how often, and by whom. What methods are already in place, and what new plans are currently being worked on behind closed doors. And as if all of that is not enough, there is another problem sitting right on top of everything else: the government. The business is split between them, which means they will have a say in every major decision. They will have their own ideas, their own goals, and their own way of handling things, and that means conflict is not a possibility, but it is guaranteed. James, are you okay? Hector's voice came, pulling James out of his thoughts, though he hadn't been thinking about anything in particular. Yeah, I'm good, he said back, leaning forward and placing his hand on the table. We need to truly reform the whole family, he began. But to be able to reform the whole family, we need to know the numbers. He paused for a moment, looking at Danny. So what are the numbers, Danny? How much liquid cash do we have? How much white magic is in the warehouse that we can sell? The money we can use is a bit over $300 million, which came from the assets of Isabella, Marco, Lucian, and Silas, at least the one we could actually get. Danny said, looking down at his paper. On our own, there are more than 200 million in different accounts and, of course, a lot of money in your private accounts. But it's better not to reach for those, as it can be a good lifeline we can reach for if something goes wrong. He looked up. On top of that, we have the warehouses, houses, cars, planes, and lots of other assets, some of which are in the hands of the government, but I'm sure you will talk to them about it. What about the white magic? James asked, thinking about the deal with Carmelo. That is a bit bad, Danny said as he looked down again at his paper. Basically, all of the others were mixing the white magic for who knows how long. But we have. He pointed his finger at a number. All we have is 2 tons. Read author's thought. Chapter 385, Paranoia. 2 tons, that is fucking good. James thought, as it was indeed not just fucking good, but more than he ever thought they would have, especially after all of this bullshit and his stand that they don't sell mixed white magic, but only the pure one. With 2 tons, he could do the deal with Carmelo, and moreover, some of it would remain with them, which he could deal with to others. That is good, he said as he looked at Danny. Anything else? Or are we done? Oh well. Danny looked around at everything because they hadn't even sat down for half an hour and didn't even think about the main point they had gathered through. I mean, we went through the hierarchy of the family, the money and drug part, so I would say yeah, we are done in that aspect. Good. Anything else? James asked again, looking around at everybody in the room. Not really, to be honest. Hector spoke. We talked about the most important matters. Our money is good and will be better, and the production line will be built, but to be able to do that, we first need to talk to the government, and then we are done, or moreover we will start to progress even more. Yeah, well, the thing Joseph had been thinking about was happening once again. Hector would do it. He will make sure everything goes perfectly, make sure it all looks good, flawless, seamless, like nothing could ever go wrong. But this time it is not just about things going smoothly. No, James had once again thought about it all, thought about how all of it would push the idea into people's minds, plant it like a seed, that Hector himself was the one running everything, that he was the one behind it all, not Joseph. And well, that's exactly the feeling Lucian had talked about, and in the end, his empire had fallen, the paranoia. The same fucking feeling that pushed Lucian slowly into his own darkness, the same feeling that made the Lucian whole family fall. What he had built up brick by brick fell back. Paranoia took over him, and even his friend became his own enemy. And this feeling was now playing out in James as well, but he didn't know why he was feeling it. He hadn't even given a single fuck about the family. He was fucking pretending, but now he felt it more than ever, felt his fear that he was paranoid against the man who was with him from the beginning, who helped him build the whole thing. He hated that he felt this way. He hated that his own thoughts were turning against him. The man who had always been at his side suddenly looked different in his eyes. James shook his head, trying to push it away, trying to force himself to think clearly, but the feeling would not leave. It was not fear of failure, not exactly. It was something worse. It was fear that even the people closest to him could become enemies without warning. And he knew, deep down, that once paranoia took hold, there was no turning back, but also knew that all of it came because of what position he sat in right now. From a broke college dropout, he suddenly became the one single man who rules over the fucking country's drug market. A man who has so much power that it is fucking unbelievable. Not just unbelievable, but a story straight out of a movie. Of course he felt that power, the fear, and the paranoia slowly creeping up on him. Moreover, because of what had happened, Raphael died, as well as Hans, and now even his mother was in another country. Great power always came with a curse. He had built this empire, but the higher he climbed, the lonelier he became. James? Hector asked as James was just staring right at nothing in the biggest silence. Though with this behavior, he just made everything worse. When others think there's a problem, that's when things get worse. That's when trust and loyalty start to break apart. So he knew he had to play it off. My leg. I need to check it out. It hurts like hell. He smiled. Once we talk with the government, then we can have another meeting where we go point by point, look at every little detail. He glanced at Daniel. How can we make more money? How can we save that money? And of course, we need to talk about Marassi and the deals I made. But once again, we need to figure out what Linda exactly wants. That's good. At least I can look through every number once again to be sure of everything. Danny sighed as he leaned back. Oh, numbers, James began. I made a deal so all the 3D printed drones and guns we have will be sold. So it would be good to count how much we have and what price we should sell them at. And then, of course, set the production for more of them. I forgot about those. Danny whispered. And well, it wasn't just him. Me too, Hector laughed. Printed weapons, bought everything to make it work and never really used them or sold any of it. Well, we're going to sell all of it and use the profit to print more, so more money will come in. James said as he slowly got up, putting his weight on the cane to act like he was truly hurt, which was why he was acting the way he did. So be sure to get it through, Danny. I will. Danny answered as he stood up too. Good, James said, but as he looked at Bella, he realized something else, the food. But he said nothing. No, he was fucked up enough. He just smiled and walked out of the office, and that was it. The meeting was over and Don Bellini was now official. Chapter 386, same as Lucian. The meeting was over, and while it ended a bit abruptly, everybody was a little surprised about James's behavior, but they went through the most important aspects and points, though not everybody left. While James went downstairs to play a little with Charlotte, or more like to paint and draw on the expensive marble, Bella and Hector stayed behind, and the atmosphere between them was anything but calm. He is breaking apart, Bella said with a voice that was rare to hear from her, the voice that was full of worry. He doesn't. It is just a lot to take in. Hector replied to her as he sighed. He is young and went through the worst period. Things happened fast, too fast. He glanced at her. It is what it is, but now we need to take care of our future, and there is no future if he breaks down, Hector. Bella cut him off. It is not just about the money, the family, the influence. It is about James. What do you mean? There was a bit of silence as she stared at him. He is not the same person we all knew. It is obvious. He changed, and it is all thanks to becoming something he never wanted to be. What are you talking about? He never wanted this. Even back at the circle, he was always laying back, and that was our power, that we were in the shadow where there wasn't one single problem. Her voice was loud as she said it. He fell apart, and this is thanks to you too. You were the one who pushed it, the one who wanted to get his hand in everything to make money, to dominate others, and look at what happened. She laughed, but that was the type of laugh that came from frustration and pain in her. I don't even recognize him, the pain in his eyes, that hollowness in his laugh and whole being. This is not the James the first met back then, and not the James the first fell in love with. The moment she said it was the moment when something switched in Hector, his whole posture, even his eyes looked so serious like it was a personal attack on him, and moreover what Bella said was something else. It sounded like disloyalty, and what followed was Hector putting his pistol on the table slowly while staring into Bella's eyes. I hope you know exactly what you said with all this. What did I say? She asked back. I am no longer one of the pillars of the family, but the pillar of him, and it seems to me I am the only one currently who gives one single fuck about him and what he goes through. Seems like I am the only one who sees him going down the same path as Lucian went through, and you exactly know what happened at the end of it. We all die, not by the feds, not by the police, but we kill each other, or more so he kills us. Lucian was a whole different. He wasn't. She shouted again but lowered her voice just enough so it would reach Hector and go through his fucking mind. The same fucking thing happened. Lucian was at the top, the fucking top of all, but nobody saved him, nobody protected him against the biggest fucking enemy that was there in plain sight, himself. Lucian wasn't a fucking weak man. He wasn't depressive, wasn't a bitch, and still he got consumed by the pressure he went through, the trauma, the paranoia, all of it together, and in the end his empire fell apart. Not a single person gave a fuck about him. Only the power, the influence, the money, and we are on the same fucking path with James. A tear rolled from her eyes as her breath was ragged and fast. Raphael's death was the start of it, and from that point on it is a fucking downhill, and I am sure the only person who keeps him anchored is none other than a child. Hector, a child keeps him alive. Can you understand that? She stared at him longer. I see you don't give a fuck about it, but I do, and not because I love him, not because I am a woman with my emotions, but because it is in plain fucking sight. Hector knew it. He knew what the fuck Bella was talking about, but it was deep down like he wanted all of it closed behind a door, believing that James is right even though he knew there is nothing right. You are afraid he will become unstable, and I know thee. No, I am afraid he will become empty, Hector. Bella cut him off once again. Unstable men make mistakes, while empty men do not care about those mistakes and the consequences. She glanced at the piston on the table and back to Hector. If one day he looks at us and sees not family, not loyalty, not love, but obstacles, your gun is not going to save you. Hector did not like the picture she was painting because it was one he had already imagined a couple of times, when the worst thing happened. You think I do not see it? I think you refuse to see it, she continued. Because if you admit it, then you admit we are losing him, and with it the family itself. The room went silent because what she said, what she talked about was all real, not just a what-ifs, but it was already happening, and they both knew it. We built an empire, Bella. And Lucian was very different. Yeah, we built an empire, and now we are losing the man who made it worth building, Bella replied, still holding eye contact. If James falls, this family will not collapse because of enemies. It will collapse because his heart stops beating, and I'm not talking about his death, Hector, but about his heart stopping for us and for himself. Chapter 387, A Child. Hector said nothing, not because he had nothing to say. No, he had his own thoughts, his own view on all of this, and to be true, he was seeing the exact same thing that Bella had just said to him. Every point, every stance she made sense. It fit the entire picture about James, but it is human to think about the good things, to not see the bad in it, to not think what if, to not even let your thoughts go to the real danger of all that James can fall into, his own despair, and more importantly, Hector had this deep connection to James that did not even let him think about it too much, to not even play with the thought that he can fall, because he was always there with him. From the beginning, he planned with him, he executed whatever he wanted to do, they reached the top together, and just thinking about it, that it all can fall, that his best friend, his partner, his boss, the man who trusted him the most, whose loyalty is his existence, is something way more painful than anything else. Because without James, without the Bellini name, they could never reach this point. Hector himself would not be able to pay for the surgery for his sister, would not have been able to save her, and it is not just about him, but many others in the family. The people who got their hope, their future because of James, and just thinking about it, that all of it can fall, is the worst. That is why Hector stayed silent, because the moment he agrees with Bella, he would have to accept the idea that James can break under all this weight no matter how high he stands, and Hector did not want to see that version of reality, did not want to imagine a world where James is not the one in control, not the one who always stands at the top, while everyone else looks up at him. But Bella was not wrong, and that was the part that made this harder to ignore, because every word she said had logic in it, and Hector could not deny that the pressure around James was growing. Government deals, money flowing from every direction, control over prices, control over people, control over the entire country. All of it was stacking on James's shoulders like layers of invisible weight that no one else could fully see. Hector knew that even the strongest man can suffocate if the pressure keeps building. But still, admitting that out loud would feel like betrayal, because if James falls, then everything they built together starts to shake, and Hector cannot accept the thought that the empire created with blood, loyalty, and sacrifice could collapse just because the man at the center finally reaches his limit. James already broke apart and built himself back up, and I think that alone proves that he would not break again. Hector began. He is strong. You saw it with your own eyes when Raphael died. That thing that stood there was barely human. That is what I am talking about, Hector. Bella's voice came as she let out a frustrated laugh, angry that Hector was acting blind on purpose. But that is over. They died, and he took the lives of many people. We took the lives of many, but it is not about that. She stared at him without looking away. What remains inside you when you lose everything you loved, Hector? Nothing. There is no revenge left because it has already been done. What remains is literally nothing, and now we are still in that phase. Hector did not answer this time, because Bella was right, more than right. Marcello, Raphael, Hans, they all died, and James paid back for every one of their deaths without mercy, without hesitation. But now he lost the last thread that tied him to his mother, who stayed away from him, and now nothing truly remained to hold him in place. Just the emptiness and a child. How fragile is that balance? To be held together by two things, on one side the sheer emptiness, the silence that comes after all the revenge is done, after all the blood is paid back, and on the other side a single child with her innocence, with her pure and honest love, love that does not know about power, about death, about control. And maybe, just maybe, that was Lucian's plan from the very beginning. No, it was not just maybe. Lucian talked about it with James when he tried to kill himself, because he understood from that point on that the only man who could succeed him, the only man who could rise higher than he ever did, would end in the same way as him. In the same darkness, emptiness, and the same end. But there was something that Lucian still had, and in the end, something he gave to James. A child who was born into their world, a child who did not choose it and did not ask for it, yet stands in the middle of it without even understanding the darkness that surrounds her every day. A child who can guide without trying to guide, who can change a man without giving a single order, without building a single plan, without ever touching a weapon or speaking about power. She doesn't know about the control, she doesn't understand what her presence truly means, and maybe that is exactly why it matters so much. Just by being White James, just by looking at him, just by holding his hand and loving him without fear, without doubt, without conditions. Maybe that is the only thing strong enough to pull James back, and exactly that was playing out as he was there with her, painting on the walls in peace, not thinking about anything else, not about the pain, not about the trauma, not about what is yet to come. For that moment there were no enemies, no pressure, no ghosts from the past. They painted in their comfortable silence, a silence that did not feel heavy, a silence that did not demand answers or strength or control, and in that silence, James did not look like a boss, not like a leader, not like a man feared by hundreds. He just looked like a man sitting beside a child, letting the world slow down for once. Chapter 388. Surprise. While Bella and Hector kept arguing over James, what was right and what was wrong with him, how his behavior could fuck up the whole family, and how only one child was anchoring him, James himself was doing exactly what Bella had told Hector. He was enjoying his time with Charlotte, where everything was just peaceful. Do you like it? Charlotte's voice came as she looked up at him with her big eyes, and James was stunned. Whoa, Charlotte, you did a great job, he said as he looked at the flowers she had painted on the marble, and it was on a whole other level. He had seen her paint a few times before, and it had always looked like a typical child's painting, nothing professional, nothing really good, just lovely in a simple way at least. But now, she painted in a way that was kind of unbelievable. The details, the colors she chose to paint with, the precision, and more than that, the fact that it was not on a canvas or paper but on marble. I never thought I would have a professional painter in my family, James said, laughing as he petted her head. What do you think about mine? He laughed again as he looked at what he had painted. It was everything but flowers. It more so looked like a dick with two balls. Looks like something Bella would like. She giggled, clearly knowing exactly what it looked like. And well, she also knew that Bella was after it. At least I tried, James said as he laughed at it, looking at it longer. Though I am happy you can paint like this. You could become an artist, somebody who sells their paintings for millions. You think? She asked back. But in that moment, something changed in her, like her eyes started sparkling as she looked up at James, and even her voice was filled with excitement. I know it, darling. James petted her head. You know there are many competitions for children who paint. Maybe I can sign you up for one. What do you think about that? Now, it was even more than excitement in her eyes as James asked. It was like she had been waiting for this moment her whole life, not just to have someone admire what she painted, but to do something more than that. To be seen, to be believed in, to have someone truly believe in what she loved doing. It was not just a safe space for her, but the one place where she could truly be herself, where nothing in the world could dim the fire inside her. From the very beginning, the same day she joined their lives and became part of his family, her eyes had been drawn to paint, brushes, and canvas. That day, when he took her shopping for art supplies, she stared at every color, every brush, every blank page as if it were treasure. In her, the world of painting was more than a hobby. It was a sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself, though on the other hand it had another metaphorical meaning, and it was none other than the blood. While Charlotte was painting with the colors where she could just be a simple child. Not an Augustus, not a Bellini, but just Charlotte. On the other hand, James was different. He had been a painter for a long time, a painter with blood, and to be able to paint with blood, it required many bodies. Lots and lots of bodies had to be taken so that he could cover the canvas in deep red, and with it, he painted a part of himself too. It was like he was the brush itself, the one that went deep into the blood and painted something terrible and gruesome. I like it, Charlotte spoke, pulling out James from his thoughts. But then you need to paint with me. With you? Yes, because you can't paint, she said as she looked back at that dick-looking flower. That is trash, Dad. Trash. James looked at her. You can be more careful with your words, you know. You said words mean a lot, so I used it to mean a lot. She smiled at him. Reality is something we can't ignore. She pointed at the wall. Trash. Well, maybe he shouldn't have said anything to her, because it was obvious she is going to use it against everyone. Moreover, she will find herself in many troubles in her life, but the damage was done, or more like the teaching. Well, you are, he felt it, and not just him, but even Charlotte felt it. What was that? She asked as she looked at James, who was looking at the chandelier, and it was shaking lightly. I don't know. He couldn't finish, but out of nowhere the shake got even worse as the whole house started trembling. Charlotte, come. James shouted as he pulled her up, but the moment got even stronger, so strong that he could barely stand on his own feet, while the furniture just fell over, smashing into the walls. James. Hector's voice came as with Bella they ran down from the office. But the shake got worse, so much worse that James couldn't stand any longer and almost fell, but Hector in time put his hand on him to support from the back. The basement, Hector shouted, looking at Bella, who grabbed James too, and together they all ran down to the basement while the shaking grew even more intense, every part of the house around them breaking. It was surreal, so surreal that Charlotte wasn't even shouting or crying. She was silent as James covered her head, and they moved down the stairs while everything around them shook and broke apart. Nobody knew what the fuck was happening. Well, they knew it was a fucking earthquake, something that had never happened, something they had never experienced in their whole lives. And now it was shaking like somebody had just dropped a nuclear bomb. Chapter 389, Run. Everything had been on their bingo card. From Hector to Bella to James to literally everybody thought about whether there would be betrayal from inside or a sudden shift in loyalty from the government that could turn into open war overnight. Like the government, the entire purpose of working with them was to wipe off every other mafia family, and in the end the only thing remaining would be to wipe off the Bellini family, so the government could easily become the one that controls the whole drug market. Even James knew that a possibility was there even if they had so many connections. And on the other hand, there was the thought of betrayal, especially after Xavier. But what they had not written on their bingo cards was a fucking earthquake. And this was not a small shake that made lamps swing or caused people to pause for a moment before returning to their normal lives. And it was not the kind of light tremor, nah. This earthquake felt like they were being fucking carpet bombed. Their only real piece of luck in that moment was the basement beneath the house. And even that luck existed only because Hector and his team reinforced the entire property from the gates to the windows to everything, making sure they could defend against any attacks. Basically, the basement had been rebuilt with survival in mind, with bomb-proof doors, with reinforced concrete walls, and with structural supports designed to withstand explosions, because Hector feared that if the government came they would not do drive-bys, but would fucking blow up the whole place. What Hector basically built was a fucking bomb shelter, and that was the only reason they still had a chance to survive, because even with all that reinforcement, the entire house shook so violently that dust poured from the ceiling in thick clouds. Cracks spread across the walls, and the noise was constant with crashes from the upper floors, and it truly felt as though the house was breaking apart piece by piece while the ground continued to roll beneath. "Are you good, James?" Hector shouted, as obviously the electricity went out too, and in the darkness nothing was visible. "We good," James shouted back as he saw nothing either, just the dark, though he knew Charlotte was there, and he kept her locked tight to himself as he fell down with the stairs onto the ground. Though he panicked a bit, not about the earthquake, but about the fact that Charlotte did not scream nor cry. Not even one word came from her. The only thing he was hearing was her breathing, and that was it. "Charlotte, are you good?" He shouted again as he petted her head, but felt something wet on her. "I am good." Her low voice came almost like a whisper. And when Bella and Hector finally found their phones and put on the flashlight, well, what they saw was everything but good, at least for James. Charlotte was truly good, without a scratch, nothing bloody on her as James's body shielded her. She was just in mild panic from the whole thing, though on the other hand James was in a bit of bad shape. "Fuck," Bella shouted as she pulled off her sweater and pressed it against James's head as it was bleeding, the blood pouring out of his head as he had hit it into the wall when he fell, but he did not feel it, not even for a moment. The adrenaline was pumping through him, though he noticed something else. "Shit," he said as he looked at his hand and up at Hector, and he kind of smiled because it was funny, like literally it was funny to him seeing his finger just fucking sideways. "It's just dislocated. I'll put it back," Hector said as he grabbed James's right hand and his pinky finger was bent to the side, and while Hector did not really care too much, popped it back right away without any thought. "Are you losing consciousness?" "No, I am good," James said as he looked at Bella, who looked at him like he had just been shot or something. "Just lightheaded. Nothing more. Check Charlotte." He looked down, and as Hector checked her, there was nothing. She was all good. Just panicked as fuck, and of course she was. It was not just the earthquake, but the fact that James's blood had dropped right onto her face, reminding her of the same thing that happened when they got attacked, the same day he almost died. "I'm going to wrap it around your head, and then we can move," Bella shouted as she wrapped her sweater around James's head tight, while Hector himself went to the far end of the basement where there was another door, the door that led outside to the garden, and they needed to be quick because the shake was getting even worse, forcing the cracks in the walls to grow bigger and more, the dust flailing down like the whole fucking place was collapsing. "I'm here, Charlotte," James said as he got up, with Bella holding her head, and pulled her up again, hugging her tight and covering her head while, with Bella's help, he slowly ran toward the door where Hector was ready to open it. "Once it's opened, just hang straight to the middle of the garden. There's nothing that can fall on us," he shouted as he looked at them, then opened it. Well, the first thing that hit them was the chaos. All the trees, the flower beds, even the outside furniture, were over on the ground like someone had bombed it. Right in front of them, in the middle of the garden, were a few people, mostly the guards, all there in a group. So they made a run for it, and thanks to the adrenaline he felt no pain in his legs as he ran through the debris. As the ground shook under his feet, he didn't even think about it. He just ran with Charlotte, and with Bella's help straight to the garden where the guards grabbed, and after they were safe he looked back and realized that they truly had luck, as the house was in half collapse on the right side. But after a moment something else caught everybody's attention. It was the emergency warning coming from the sirens. Tsunami? Chapter 390, Curse. It was more surreal than anything else as the warning sirens were screaming while the ground was still shaking. It felt as if the whole nation was under attack, as if a war had suddenly broken out. But rather than an air raid or anything like that, it was another kind of warning that shocked them even more than before. It is one thing to expect a sudden earthquake. Maybe it is a bit exciting the first time. But this was anything but exciting right now, as the house itself had collapsed on one side. And now the siren was repeating one word they never expected to hear. A tsunami warning. It was absurd. No, not even absurd. There were no words to truly describe the whole thing, because they were prepared for everything. At the height of their drug empire, they expected an attack from a rival mafia or even the government. But this was not an attack. It was not the mafia, nor the government. It was nature itself destroying them. James. Suddenly Mike's voice came as he ran from the side, his clothes all dirty, looking like he had just crawled out of the rubble. He had 2 medical bags in his hands and immediately ran to James to check him, pushing his gaze to the wound on his head. It's good, just a cut. He continued as he pulled out some disinfectant and poured it over his head, then wrapped the whole thing in gauze, and there was not a single word from James nor anybody else. They were just shocked. Are we safe? Bella asked as she looked at Hector, though he did not even answer as he was trying to make a call. We are. Mike answered her as he was checking others too who had injured themselves. This is one of the highest points, and we are far away from the city and the docks, so we only need to be careful about the earthquake. Was there even any Amber Alert? Hector asked as he looked at his phone, and even the signal was gone. I didn't receive a single message about this shit. There wasn't. Ramser spoke as he suddenly appeared from the back, looking all dirty like he had been in the middle of the chaos. There wasn't anything, but I got a video from our boys in the city, and it's bad. Half of it was destroyed, and the dock area flooded. As soon as Ramirez said it, everybody understood. They did not even need to think about it. The thought came to all of them at the same time. They were fucked. Because if the family house, this mansion that was not even a simple mansion but a reinforced fortress built to survive attacks and explosions, had collapsed or at least half of it had fallen apart, then what about everything else they owned across the city? What about the warehouses, the hangars, the dock storage buildings, and all the places they had? Taken from other families like Silas and Augustus? There was no doubt in their minds about what had happened to those places. Most of them, if not all of them, were made of wood and sheet metal and nothing more. Some were old buildings they had taken over. Others were built quickly just to store goods and move them fast, and now an earthquake had hit with full force following it by a tsunami. If this mansion could not stand untouched, then those places never had a chance. And with those buildings, everything inside them was probably gone too. The cocaine stored in the warehouses, packed and ready to move. The money they had counted on, the numbers Mike had mentioned before now meant nothing. In just a few minutes, what looked like an untouchable empire could have been reduced to dust. Not only the drugs, but the drones, the printing machines, the packaging equipment, all the tools they used to run their trade, could be destroyed. Even the weapon warehouses, filled with rifles, ammunition, and supplies meant for war, were probably damaged or completely buried under rubble. What they had built over years with blood, fear, and careful planning might have been wiped out in a single moment by the earth itself. And as everybody thought about it more and more, it was almost like a curse itself. The curse that didn't allow even one mafia to stay in the city and remain on top. The curse that had destroyed every empire before them, had returned, and now, for James and the Bellini family, but not gunshots, not bombs, not betrayal, but an earthquake to claim everything they had built, every piece of their empire. It felt as if the city itself had decided that no mafia, no matter how clever or powerful, could ever truly stay on top, and now the curse had arrived in full force, and well, it was ending too. Yeah, it was as sudden as it came, almost impossibly quick, and then just as quickly, it started calming down, while the sirens kept screaming their warnings, shouting for people to reach higher ground. And then, just like that, it was over. And well, it was clear to everybody that it wasn't a curse that targeted them alone. No, the whole city was ruined on a scale that no one could have ever imagined. Entire blocks had collapsed and been destroyed, streets literally rising and cracking as the ground shifted beneath them, electricity failing everywhere, water flooding and chaos consuming every corner of the city in a way that no one had ever witnessed before. They built up all of it, and now it all got destroyed in less than 10 minutes, not even thinking about the lives that were lost. Yeah, the lives. Ferrucci and Finn. Mike whispered as he realized that they were still in the city, still in that private hospital. And in that moment, everyone understood that it was not just about the drugs and weapons anymore, but, more importantly, about their people, their family. Chapter 391. The Right Order and the Cruel Questions. No way this was happening. What were the fucking odds of something like this? James thought as he stood there, and it almost felt like his mind had stopped working for a moment, because what he was seeing and hearing did not feel real at all. It felt impossible, and a tsunami? That was something people only saw on the news from other countries, some faraway tragedy that had nothing to do with this place. But now suddenly an earthquake had started everything, shaking buildings, cracking roads, tearing the ground apart like it had been waiting for this moment for years, and before anyone could even understand what was happening, a tsunami followed right after it. It felt unreal, and while James could not stop the thought that it was like his entire life had become a magnet for disasters. When he was still a college student, he had been nothing more than a nobody, a broke kid trying to survive day by day back. Then the country had been peaceful. Nothing ever happened. But the moment he stepped into the world of the mafia, the moment he became part of it, everything around him had started to collapse, and now this. An earthquake followed by a tsunami. Like what the actual fuck? It almost felt like every step he took in that world was followed by another catastrophe, as if fate itself had decided that chaos would walk beside him wherever he went. And this time the catastrophe was not something small. This was something that could wipe out thousands of lives. A disaster that would not only destroy buildings, businesses, and assets, but one that would crush families, erase homes, and leave behind nothing but ruins and grief. "James, we need to get Finn and Ferrucci," Mike suddenly shouted, but the moment he looked directly at James, he realized that he was already thinking. Even though blood was still running down his face, even though the situation around them was chaotic and terrifying, James was not frozen like the others. While many of the guards and soldiers around them looked confused and stunned, trying to understand what was happening and what they should do next, James was already thinking through the situation step by step. What to do? What needed to be done first? Who needed to move? And in the end, there was only one decision that made sense. Everybody who has family can leave and go find them. Make sure they are safe, James ordered as he turned his head toward Ramirez. This goes for everyone here. His eyes shifted toward Mike. "Mike, you too. Go and find your family." For a moment he paused, then his gaze moved across the group around him. The guards, the soldiers, the men who worked under him. Everyone. James continued as he looked at each of them. "Go make sure the people you care about are alive." "I stay," Hector said without hesitation as he stepped forward slightly and looked straight at James. "I already flew my family out of the country." There was no fear in his voice, only loyalty. "I stay too," Bella said as she moved closer to James and grabbed his hand tightly. "We are family," she shouted as gently pulled Charlotte closer to them, wrapping an arm around the little girl and holding her near her side. Charlotte looked small compared to the chaos around them, but Bella did not let go. Because in that moment, staying together was the only thing that felt certain in a world that suddenly seemed ready to fall apart. And that was exactly why James said what he said, and why he gave the order that surprised many of the men standing around him. He did not say it out of panic, and he did not say it without thinking, because every word he spoke came from a clear understanding of the situation they were now facing and the reality that disasters like this did not only destroy cities and buildings, but also tear apart families. That was why he ordered his men to go, not simply to leave the area, but to spread the message to everyone else in the family, to make sure that every man, every worker, every soldier would hear the same order and understand that they were not being forced to stay while their loved ones might be in danger somewhere in the city. In a situation like this, when everyone already understood that thousands of people could have died, when the destruction of the earthquake and the tsunami had already reached a scale that nobody could truly measure yet, the truth became something that nobody wanted to say out loud. People had already died, and because of that, the worst decision a leader could make in a moment like this would be to lock down his men, to keep his soldiers and workers beside him while their thoughts and their hearts were somewhere else entirely, thinking about their wives, their children, their parents, and the homes they had left behind. A man who feared for his family could not think clearly, and a soldier who believed that his loved ones might be trapped under rubble or drowning somewhere in the chaos would never truly be present in the moment, because his mind would always return to the same question again and again. Are they alive? James understood the question better than most people, because he had lived through enough pain in his own life to know what it felt like to lose control over the safety of the people you cared about. That was why he did not chain them to their duty. Instead, he allowed them to move, to run if they needed to search through the chaos and make sure that the people they loved were still alive, because forcing them to stay would only build resentment and fear, while letting them go would create something far stronger: trust. By giving that order, James was not just allowing them to leave. He was sending a clear message to everyone who belonged to the family, a message that said he stood with them and not above them, that he did not see them as tools to be used during disaster, but as people whose lives and families mattered just as much as the work they did for him. And in a moment where the entire world seemed to be shaking and breaking apart, that message carried more than any order shouted in anger or fear, because it reminded everyone that even in the middle of chaos, there was still something that held them together. They were not just soldiers, and they were not just workers who followed commands. They were a family, and when disaster strikes, a family does not hold each other back with orders or chains, but instead allows each other to go and run toward the people they love. And indeed, it was the right call that James made. As everybody left, everyone returned to their cars and made their way home to their loved ones. And with that, James took one more step toward becoming the Don who is loved by many. And it wasn't the end. He was about to become not just a man loved by his own soldiers, but a man loved by many across the city. While those people who were supposed to help to handle the situation were panicking, send out the military, all the helicopters, all the planes we have in the air, send the boots on the ground, send everybody all over the country. Sir, we don't have enough. We need to focus on. On what? William slammed the table as looked at the newly appointed vice president. Our supporters. The man shouted, looking at William. The capital is our main power, and it always has been. If we don't act, don't save as many people as we can, we lose our support, we lose our power. We need to focus on what we build upon, not those who despise us. The one thing worse than disaster itself is the political motivation that comes with it. Who do you save when you don't have enough men? Do you save those who support you, the main power of the government? Or do you focus on saving those on the opposing side, in those villages, small cities, and towns that have been abandoned a long time ago? Questions that should never exist, but the cruelty of the world is that they are real. Chapter 392. Two different views. It was simply surreal, and at the same time it showed the reality of how broken the world truly was, or more precisely how broken the country and its political system had become. People usually only hear about things like this in undeveloped countries or in dictatorships, and even there it is different, because at least in a dictatorship people clearly know that no one is going to help them. They understand their place and the limits of their hope. But in a so-called democracy, it should not even be a question. It should not even be a debate. It should be the duty and the will of the government officials, the people in power, to help everyone without hesitation. But that was not what was happening inside the presidential palace. How fucked up is that? A real disaster had already destroyed streets and entire blocks. It had taken many lives, and no one even knew how many people were still buried under the rubble. And that was not even mentioning the tsunami that followed. And yet the very people who were supposed to protect the citizens and send out rescue teams were standing there arguing about where to help first. We need to focus on the capital and the big cities, not on the towns and the other regions. William, the advisor shouted. This is our power. This is our backup. These are the people who keep us standing. He refused to step back from his position, and to be honest, he was not entirely wrong. The voting system is complicated. The cities, especially the capital, hold more power than any town or rural region could ever hope to have, and that imbalance shapes everything. It does not matter how many villages stand against them or how many smaller regions suffer, because in the end, only the big cities truly decide the outcome. If you have the capital on your side and the major cities supporting you, then you have already won before the final vote is even counted. That was exactly what the advisor was trying to protect. He was not thinking about fairness or responsibility, and he was not thinking about the people who were dying under collapsed buildings. He was thinking about control, about influence that determined whether they would remain in power or lose everything. In his mind, the decision was not about who needed help the most, but about who mattered the most to their survival as leaders. So the logic was clear. Focus only on the people who already supported them, the ones living in the capital and the large cities, the ones whose votes carried real weight, and ignore the rest where people had already turned against the government long ago. Those people were seen as lost causes, as voices that would never support them no matter what they did. And the truth was, those people had their reasons. They were the ones who lived with reality every single day. They did not live in comfort or illusion. Many of them were struggling to survive. Some of them were starving. Others could not find work no matter how hard they tried. And poverty was not just a phase for them, but a constant condition that shaped their entire lives. They saw the system for what it truly was, not what it pretended to be. But in the advisor's eyes, that did not matter. Helping them would not bring votes. It would not strengthen their position, and it would not secure their future in power. To him, it was a wasted effort, a risk with no reward. And in a moment where every decision could decide their political survival, he believed they could not afford to waste anything on people who would never stand with them. "If you say that again, I will kill you myself, Madro," William said, his eyes locked onto him. And for the first time ever, he truly looked like someone who was ready to kill without hesitation. "We are in a national emergency, one that we created so we could bring people to our side, and its whole purpose is to gather everyone's attention and make them work toward us, so that we can finally have something that connects us all, something that pushes us forward toward greatness and into security. We have killed, imprisoned, and arrested half of our own government. We got rid of those who opposed us, and now our numbers and statistics are rising across the countryside, in the villages and the towns, and after everything we have done, you are really standing here and saying we should abandon them, that we should just let them die." Maduro suddenly started laughing as he looked at William. "How hypocritical are you?" he asked. "You became rich the moment you became president, and your whole family did too. Your son, your daughter, even your grandmother. And now you are talking about justice and protecting people like you are some kind of hero. You sold the country as soon as you got power, William. So what are you even talking about?" He continued. "You are working with a drug lord who poisoned the whole country, and you act like this is something good. And it has a purpose." William shouted back as he hit the table with his hand. "What purpose?" Maduro asked right away. "To make more money, to get more power, because that is all this looks like to me." "His purpose is to die," William shouted. "He is there to make us stronger, to get more votes, to bring more people to our side. That is his purpose. That is the Bellini family's purpose. We use them while we need them, and when the time comes, we will be the ones to cut off his head." Maduro thought he had misheard it, that William hadn't said what he thought he said, that it was just a hallucination. But no, he had really said it, that he would have James Bellini killed. Chapter 393, Purpose of His Being. For a moment, silence settled between them. Of course it did, because it made no fucking sense. No, it was more of a suicide plan than what Maduro himself had just said to William, leaving people alone in the countryside, letting them die, and only helping those in the cities. But what William had just said went even beyond that. Just thinking about it, about killing James Bellini, the man around whom everything they had built revolved, the one who connected all the pieces together, the one who kept the balance intact even if that balance was built on blood, lies, and corruption. And that was exactly why Maduro couldn't take it seriously at first. It felt too extreme, too reckless, like something no rational person would ever actually follow through on. Whoa, what a grand plan. Do you think he is stupid? Does it even matter? William asked in a serious tone. His whole purpose is to die. That is why we built everything around him, to show the world that a young man can reach this level. But the government will always hunt him down. That is his role in all of this. We will break him. We will kill his mother, his daughter. We will kill everyone around him. And in the end, when he loses his mind, people will see how dangerous he is. They will see that he is not one of them, that he destroys everything in his path. William looked straight at Maduro, his expression empty. And that is when they will choose us. That is the whole point of his being, of his role. Silence filled the room again as Maduro slowly started realizing that William truly believed what he had just said, that this was not just anger or empty words, but something real, something he actually wanted to do. And that was what made it even worse. "William, are you serious?" "I am." He began staring at Maduro. He is a mafia leader and nothing more. He continued, his voice steady and controlled, as if he had thought about this many times before. He is not a god, not a demon, not some kind of monster that cannot be touched. He is a human being, and he is followed by other human beings, and that is all he is. He paused for a moment, then continued. He is flesh and blood, just like anyone else, and so does his mother, and so does his daughter. He has something to lose, and that is exactly what makes him weak. And once we take away what he loves the most, once we remove everything that gives him strength, his mind will start to break. We will use that. We will push him, we will break him, we will strip everything away from him until he loses control. We will make him desperate, we will make him unstable, and when that happens, when he can no longer think clearly, that is when he will make mistakes. And when he becomes weak, when he loses control, even his own people will start to turn against him. Fear will spread, doubt will spread, and in the end, he will stand alone. That is when we strike. That is when we end him, not as a man with power, but as a broken man who has nothing left. All Maduro could do was bury his face in his hands, the frustration and stress finally getting to him. Because what William was saying no longer sounded like a plan. It sounded like something completely out of control, something that should not even be said out loud. Do you even hear yourself? Maduro asked, lifting his head again, his voice tighter now. You created a drug lord that this country has never seen before, and now you want to cut him down and use him in your plan, William. Is that really what you were saying to me? That is not a strategy. That is madness. You are talking about controlling something that you helped create, something that is already dangerous, and now you want to push it even further. We need to concrete our power, William answered. If someone else wins, all of us will be executed, and everything we built will fall apart. Still, it made no sense to Maduro, because he knew about the Bellini family, about James himself, and about everything tied to them. He knows about the connections, the documents, the files, and the almost unimaginable power they hold in their hands. He knows about the hundreds of thousands of pictures, the videos, and all the evidence of corruption, drug abuse, and stolen money. Not even mentioning how deeply they have already embedded themselves within the government because of that. He also knows the consequences of killing James. It would only bring death to everyone. The war that would erupt after that would be worse than anything they had ever faced before, worse than any crisis they had ever witnessed, because it would not just destroy people, it would destroy the system itself. Everything would fall apart. People would lose trust, and the country would become unstable in a way that could no longer be controlled. It would not be a victory, it would be chaos. No, it would be more than chaos. All the blackmailing material that is in the hands of the Bellini family. All of it would literally be the suicide of every government official. All of it would lead to endless bloodshed. William, this is the worst. He couldn't finish his sentence. The doors suddenly burst open as the army generals, rescue team leaders, and others walked into the meeting room, all of them ready to begin the planning. But Maduro couldn't get the thought out of his mind. William is on a path that will destroy everything they have built, and one thing is certain. If William truly goes through with his plan, it won't just be the Bellini family that turns against him, but also people from his own government. Chapter 394, Snake. It began very quickly, and with the order of William, tens of thousands of soldiers were sent out at once to help the major cities, the smaller towns, and even the distant villages. While at the same time a special operational group was created to gather volunteers, and in what felt like no time at all, thousands of people stepped forward to help those trapped under rubble, those swept away by the tsunami and the waves, and even the Union sent rescue teams and peacekeepers to try and save as many lives as possible. But the destruction was far greater than anyone had expected. The earthquake was something beyond normal, a 9.1 magnitude disaster that broke the record in the continent and destroyed whatever it could, and the real fear was not just how strong it was, but how much it was able to destroy in such a short time. Because there were no real earthquake-proof skyscrapers, apartments, or houses, which made the cities feel almost like they were built to collapse. And in some cases that is exactly what happened, because one of the skyscraper collapsed completely, killing at least 2,000 people by itself, without even counting the falling debris that hit the ground and other buildings, like spreading even more death and destruction. And it became clear within the first hours of rescue that the numbers would rise far beyond what anyone could handle. Just 4 days later, the number of deaths was already estimated to be around 50,000, and that number did not even include the people who had disappeared or those still trapped under the rubble, making it feel less like a disaster and more like a massacre caused by nature itself. And one of the worst parts of all of this was the tsunami that followed. It was not just because it killed thousands of people and not just because it destroyed ports and caused billions in damage, but because the waves came dangerously close to a nuclear reactor near the coastline. And while the situation could have become even worse than it already was, somehow, whether by luck or fate, the reactor was not damaged, but everything else was, and it was just about the deaths. The whole country fell into a heavy atmosphere, into pure depression, and of course it did, because how could it not when so many people had lost everything at once? When some lost their entire families, others their daughters or their sons, some lost their parents, their friends, and for many, the life they had woken up to that morning was simply gone by night. And the worst part of all of it was not just the grief, but the feeling that even the government itself was lost, because one simple and terrifying question kept coming up again and again. How are you supposed to rebuild billions worth of destruction when all you have done for years is stealing billions? It became clear to almost everyone that even a country with a strong economy can be pushed to the edge by something like an earthquake, something sudden and violent that slows everything down and puts pressure on every system at once. But a country that has been draining its own money, wasting it, or stealing it, does not get pushed to the edge. It simply falls off it without anything to hold on to. In short, it was over, or at least it should have been. But the Union was still there with loans and support, and of course Marassi, because Darvik immediately reached out to William, offering assistance with both personnel and with a loan with an interest rate so high that it almost felt insulting, especially considering that this was a country that had just gone through an earthquake and a tsunami. And yet, even in a moment like this, Prophet still found a way to stand above everything else. Why now, God, do you hate us this much? Linda's voice was quiet and broken, barely holding together, and even though she was asking the question out loud, it did not sound like she truly expected an answer, but more like a desperate attempt to throw her pain somewhere, anywhere. I think he does hate us. Another voice joined, and the moment Linda heard it, her face changed into hatred, to say at least. What are you doing in my office? Came to talk. Madhur answered as he casually sat down. You look destroyed. Our economy is about to collapse. We need 300 billion in loans just to keep things standing and rebuild the country. So I don't really know how I'm supposed to look right now, and now a snake shows up in my office. Snake? Madhur let out a small laugh. You are a snake, one that only wants power and influence. Linda leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked onto him. To be honest, you should have been put on the kill list. Why are you this angry? We are in the middle of a catastrophe, and you are threatening me. Linda did not answer right away, but the hatred on her face said more than enough. Madhur is the worst kind of snake, not just someone who wants power, but someone who will do anything to obtain it, no matter the cost, no matter who has to suffer for it. And while officially he is only an advisor to William, in reality, he is far more than that. The only good thing about him is that he operates on a government level, which means he goes after officials, governors, mayors, members of Congress, and so on. Anyway, we are professionals, or at least we should be. We work for the same goal, and that is why I am here today. Madhur continued, and Linda immediately noticed something was off. Madhur is a narcissistic man who sees himself as the only one. He never asks for help or helps others, doesn't care at all about goals. And now seeing him be the one to start a conversation about goals and working together was just absurd. What is so important in the middle of a catastrophe that you came to me in person? There was silence for a second that just pushed Linda even further into believing that something truly was off. William plans to kill James Bellini, or more precisely, he plans to kill everyone around him and then him. Madhur began as he stared at Linda, who didn't even blink, just stared back at him. William wants to use Bellini as the force that will cement him into the position he has now, basically a campaign element. And before you tell me that I am a snake who just wants to stab William in the back or wage war against you and him, that is not true. The truth is that William will destabilize the government and us with his move if he does it. I am not a saint, and I know Bellini has files about me too, as well as you and everybody we know and are involved in all of this. He stopped for a second. We need to stop William. Here's a cleaned and corrected version while keeping your tone and intensity. Nothing, not a single word came from Linda, and she didn't even look shocked or surprised. No, it looked like she didn't believe a single word Madur said, and indeed, she didn't. That is impossible. She simply said, "That is why I hate women." Madur said as he sighed and leaned back. What was the purpose of killing everybody? He let out a breath again. It's to make one man rule, to be the king of the game and to expose him to the people, to point at him as the only remaining one, and then cut his head off and parade with it. That is the plan that William wants to do and will do. It is obvious he made a drug lord stronger than everybody, and now he is going to use him to gain more power. And that is why it is impossible. Linda raised her voice now. Madur, this is too clear, too stupid a plan, just to kill him, to use him as a way to become president, to stay in power. James is the same as cows. Madur began. Farmers raise cows, and then what do? They slaughter them and sell them. James Bellini is the same. William enabled him to do things that were impossible, and he did it until he reached this level, and now William only needs to slaughter him. Silence once again, but Linda still kept that face, the unbothered one, the one that doesn't believe. Yeah, well, leave now, please. What? I said leave and never come back. And please don't tell this nonsense to anyone. The only thing Madur could do was laugh. It started as a quiet laugh, but it quickly grew louder from frustration, becoming almost uncontrollable as he leaned back in his seat, his head tilted back, his face turning red from anger. But he didn't try anymore. No, he didn't say anything, just stood up and left, while Linda herself just stared at nothing and whispered 3 words. I knew it. Chapter 395, Necessary Step. I fucking knew it. Linda shouted as her fist slammed hard into the wooden table, knocking off documents, maps, and she did not stop. Again and again, she kept hitting the table like it was William himself standing in front of her, like if she just hit hard enough, she could make him feel even a fraction of what she was feeling right now. William was walking a path that would destroy everything they had built together, every sacrifice, every risk, every moment they had fought to survive, and there was nothing she could do to stop it, nothing she could say that would pull him back, and that truth hurt far more than any wound ever could, because this wasn't their fucking plan. The plan had always been clear, at least in Linda's mind, and it was the only thing that made all of this worth it in the first place, because everything they had done, every risk they had taken, every line they had crossed, was leading to this one outcome that would change everything. They were supposed to turn James from a criminal into a legitimate businessman. The idea was to legalize the drugs that would bring in billions, not just for him, but for the entire economy, turning something illegal into something powerful. That was the future they were building. A future where James was not just a drug lord, but a force inside the economy itself, someone whose influence could not be erased because it was tied into everything that mattered, someone who could not be removed without shaking the very system that depended on him. But now William was doing the exact opposite. He was walking straight toward destruction, toward a path that would burn everything down instead of building it up, a path that would kill the very idea that could have brought in billions and strengthened everything around them. And the worst part was not even what he was doing, but when he chose to say it, during that catastrophe, at the worst possible moment, when every word carried weight, and Linda understood exactly what he meant and why he said it to Madur, especially now when everything was already on the edge of collapse. It was a plan to keep power, nothing more and nothing less, because if William could not handle the catastrophe, if things began to slip out of his control, then he could simply turn the situation around and use James and the others as a shield, as a sacrifice if needed. He could twist the story, reshape the narrative, and claim that James was taking advantage of the chaos to profit even more from the drugs, turning public anger toward him instead. And as terrible as it sounded, Linda knew it could work because people needed someone to blame, and William was ready to give them that. William could say that James and the corrupt ministers had stolen money, that they had drained resources that should have been used to protect people, and that was why nothing had been done before the tsunami, why no proper wave breakers had been built, why buildings were not prepared to survive earthquakes, why there had been no emergency broadcasts in time, why people had been left to die when they could have been saved. He could build the entire story around that idea piece by piece, until it became the truth in the eyes of everyone watching. And in the end, he could trace everything back to corruption and to James, turning him from the man they were trying to elevate into the very symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The reality was that propaganda could work, not just could, it certainly would. "Fuck this motherfucker," Linda shouted as she slammed her fist down one last time before she finally dropped back into her chair, blood slowly dripping from her torn knuckles, while her heart was beating so fast that she could feel it pounding inside her head. "That's bad," a voice suddenly asked, as the wardrobe door on the side of the slowly opened and Thomas stepped out from between Linda's hanging clothes. He was the one who had informed Linda about Madur coming. Since everything had started, Thomas, Stephen, Benjamin, and Linda had formed an alliance, one that was never spoken out loud but understood between all of them, because they all knew that in a situation like this, trust was fragile and survival came first, and if they did not act carefully, they could easily be the next ones to fall. So they prepared. Each of them placed agents around people who held power, watching, listening, waiting for any shift that could threaten them. And it was one of those agents, a spy assigned to Madur, who had alerted Thomas that he was heading straight for Linda. That was why Thomas had hidden himself inside the closet in her office, waiting in silence, listening to every word. "Fuck," Linda shouted as she slammed her hand into the table once again as she turned to look at Thomas, only to pause for a second when she noticed how calm he was, too calm for a situation like this. "Pills," Thomas said before Linda could even ask. "Though I think we both already know what step is necessary to take. We need to kill William." He said it so calmly that for a second it didn't even seem serious about it. But as Thomas looked directly into Linda's eyes, there was something different in his expression, something calculated, like he was no longer just reacting but planning several steps ahead. "William made you the leader of the operation," Thomas continued, "which means if he dies during the national emergency, the succession will go to you, and you will be the temporary president until the national emergency is over. He even made a special decree for this," Thomas added, his gaze not leaving her face. "So, basically, he built a trap for himself." A silence between them, or more so silence for Linda, because she knew what Thomas just said was true and that it could work, but the idea of killing William, like truly killing him, was something else entirely, and not just that. That is what made her silent. Thomas was talking about it like he had already planned it out a long time ago. It is not just for James, but William's death would be for the greater good. Everybody hates him. The union holds back billions. Our trade partners are on the brink of leaving us, and we are getting sanctions too. Thomas kept looking into her eyes. This catastrophe stamped the death of our nation, so we need somebody who can lead us out of it, and then James can come into the picture too. The certainty in Thomas's eyes was something Linda had not seen in a long time, not even during the operation. "Linda, we need to kill our president, or this country is going to collapse anyway, even without James' death." Chapter 396, Pills. The silence between Linda and Thomas was the kind of silence where neither of them needed to say anything, because both of them already understood that this was the only path left in front of them. It was not the type of silence filled with confusion, panic, or anger. It was the type of silence that came when people finally accepted a truth they had been trying to avoid for far too long, when they had spent so much time pretending there were still other choices left that they almost forgot what reality looked like. More than anything, the silence itself felt like proof to Linda that what Thomas had just said was the reality they could no longer escape from. It was a reality so huge, so terrible, and so impossible that it almost felt unreal. Yet at the same time, it was the only true way out of everything, even if it sounded outrageous, insane, and completely impossible to the people outside of the room. Linda had always known that one day something like this could happen. In her mind, she had always imagined handling everything in a more political way, in a more democratic way, in a way where there was still time left to save the country before everything collapsed. She imagined a future where she would run for the presidential seat, and deep down she knew that if that had happened, she could have become president without much trouble. People love her. To the public, she is the woman behind all the arrests, the woman who brings down gangs, criminals, corrupt officers, and powerful men who believe they are untouchable. In their eyes, she is some kind of hero, someone who stands up when nobody else wants to, Someone who is willing to get her hands dirty while the rest of the government hides behind speeches and promises. People trust her. People respect her. Many of them believe she is the only honest person left in the entire government. If she announced her candidacy tomorrow, they would follow her without hesitation. They would vote for her because they still believe in her, because they still believe she can save the country when nobody else can. But there is no way to do it like that anymore. No matter how much she wants it, it is impossible. By the time the election comes, the country will already collapse on its own. The earthquake has most likely delivered the last stab into the body of the nation, and now all everybody can do is wait for it to bleed out slowly until there is nothing left to save. All of what we did now means nothing, Linda said as she laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that came when the stress became too much to hide. The operations against the gangs, the cartels, all of it means nothing now. Crime is already climbing up. People are looting stores, homes, and businesses. The gangs and the cartels are becoming stronger again because the soldiers guarding the border were pulled back. She shook her hand in frustration. We arrested hundreds of people, and we killed hundreds more, but now it feels like none of it mattered. It feels like all we did was slow them down for a little while before everything went back to the way it used to be. We killed hundreds of people for nothing at all. She laughed again before leaning back in her chair, staring down at the ground beneath her feet as the scene she had just repaired in her mind replayed itself. The scene when they raided that house, when they killed the children and the mother, they killed an entire family for the greater good. Yet now that greater good was nowhere to be found, and she had realized that it had never been for any greater good at all. They had simply murdered them for nothing. Linda is far from a monster. She can handle it. She can even try to push it down, since she has witnessed it. She is unable to sleep without pills, and even those pills do nothing because those children always appear in her mind, and now it has only gotten worse as their death was truly for nothing at all. The pills, Linda. Thomas sighed as he pulled a small medicine container from his pocket. You know this is poison, right? He asked with a faint smile on his face. A pill that numbs you. A pill that pushes emotions aside. A pill that makes you human. What a medicine it is. He paused, looking at her. But you know it's a poison, one that slowly kills anyone who uses it, day by day. I've been using it since I became an agent. Benjamin, Steve, and me. When we speak about pain, our legs, our hands, our heads, anything, it's because of this. He shook the container lightly. It's poison, but we keep taking it because it doesn't just push away our emotions. It torments us, reminds us of what we've become, and that this is all we can do. We can't shoot ourselves. We can't slit our veins or throw ourselves off a building. That would be pathetic. We've killed so many, yet we can't let ourselves go the easy way. After a brief silence, Thomas threw the pill container into her lap. Feel it, Linda. Feel the pain and torment, because that's all we have left to do. Silence followed, not just because of what Thomas said, but because of the realization that came with it. The realization that the pills Linda had been taking all this time were actually poison. She had never questioned them, never thought about it. She had assumed they were simple sedatives. But now she understood that they were slowly killing her. And as she thought about it more, she realized why the agent's suicide rate was so high, not only because of the horrors and terror they faced in the field, but because the pills themselves amplified the pain so intensely that some took their own lives. These are pills that push you towards suicide in the end. And for those who don't give in, for those who don't end their lives with their own hands, the pills continue their work until they destroy the body completely, taking the last breath by the slow, inevitable poison coursing through their veins. The limping of Stephen, the headaches of Benjamin, the pale skin of Thomas, all of them endure it, feeling every drop of pain. They punish themselves for what they have done. I am going to tell Benjamin and Stephen about William. So be ready to make plans, and it would be good to talk with James too. You want me to poison myself? Linda's voice trembled as she looked at Thomas, and her eyes were strange. She looked like someone offended by it, like she wanted more and more to live, someone who didn't want to die. It's up to you, Linda. Thomas began as he opened the door and looked back at her. But it's better to slowly die than live a long life like this. Chapter 397. Everybody knows. Linda got the answers she had been searching for about Thomas, and while at first it shocked her, it did not stop there. It quickly became something far worse than mere surprise, because what she realized in that instant was that everything surrounding this situation, everything that had led to this moment, was nothing more than complete bullshit that had been building for decades without anyone even noticing, or perhaps pretending not to. There was really only one word that could describe it all: bullshit. She thought about a country where the leaders of agencies, the very people meant to guide and protect, were left to poison themselves under the weight of their own sins, where enduring emotional torment and post-traumatic stress was nothing compared to the physical pain they inflicted on themselves through pills, through poison, through desperate measures they believed were their only way out. What kind of reality allowed this to happen? How could all of this have gone so horribly, catastrophically wrong? And why had nobody stopped it when they first saw it beginning to unravel? These questions spun endlessly in her mind, but there was not a single answer to be found, not a single explanation, not even a glimpse of understanding, because the rot had started decades ago, decades of corruption, decades of disastrous and mismanaged decisions, decades of so-called democracy that had existed only in name. All of this because of money and power. She whispered, her voice trembling as she looked up at the ceiling. But what is the greater good then? That question that she kept thinking about, because if there was no greater good, then what had anyone been fighting for? And why had so many lives been destroyed in the process? What had been the goal behind all the bloodshed, the corruption, the lies, and the endless suffering? She thought about the people who had died, the innocent lives erased, the families torn apart, and she could not imagine a single justification for any of it. No purpose, no plan, no noble cause, nothing that could explain it, and now it is just once again a circle. The borders were open again, and with that came new waves of violence, the cartels walking into the country, and of course the elephant in the room. The disaster that had triggered all of this, the earthquake that had destroyed homes, claimed tens of thousands of lives, and left the economy on the edge of collapse, leaving the government scrambling to secure foreign loans that, while meant to rebuild, came with strings attached, allowing outsiders to interfere in ways that could make the corruption far worse, far more visible, and far more dangerous to everyone involved. All the loans, all the foreign aid. She whispered again, closing her eyes, knowing perfectly well that each offer carried its own price, a price of influence, power where those who claimed to be helping would instead be probing for weaknesses, exploiting and potentially uncovering the largest corruption scandal the continent had ever seen, while ordinary civilians, exhausted and terrified, already filled the streets in massive protests against the government. And as she imagined all of it, the sheer impossibility of fixing anything, the magnitude of human suffering, the relentless weight of greed and incompetence crushing everything, a thought rose in her mind. I should just fucking shoot myself and be done with it. In Linda's mind, the pills, they meant nothing. Why should she bother? She could just pull the fucking trigger and be done. But I can't, she whispered again. I am the Attorney General of this crushed, fucking bullshit. Count. Miss Linda. There was a sudden knock on the door, followed by a man opening it. Miss Olivia has arrived for the meeting. Olivia? Who is that? Well. Jerry looked down at his notes. I'm not really sure, but she went through the checking, so I guess you need to see her. His words were careful, though Linda's eyes were not exactly welcoming, to say the least. I can send her. No. Get her in, Linda said as she got up from the chair, wiping the blood off the table. Olivia? Who is she? Linda wondered, but she had no idea. Her days passed in endless meetings with people from the government, just to make them feel important, and of course, she talked with civilians too. A lot of them, and the fact that Olivia went through the security checks meant she must really want to meet her. So Linda cleaned her hands on the table, tossed the pill into the trash, and sat down, putting on a fake smile, or at least she tried to put one on. But because of the stress, the smile came out weird, more manic than warm or welcoming one. Though her struggle to smile didn't stop the door from opening. Miss Olivia, nice to meet you, Linda said as she stood up to greet her, putting on the impression that she knew exactly who she was meeting with. Likewise, nice to meet you, Attorney General, and thank you for making time for me, Olivia said, and Linda immediately felt it. Olivia was different from everyone else she had met so far. All of the others who came to her had that choked, trembling voice, that weak one searching for help, wanting advice and comfort, wanting reassurance that she would help them, that the government would help them. But Olivia's voice was different. Not just her voice, But her whole demeanor, her eyes, she looked certain about something. Yeah, she had come to Linda with certainty. So, what exactly would you like to discuss with me? Linda asked, though she did not use the same soft tone or attitude as with others, because she already knew that Olivia was not there for nice and comforting words. I am the president of the New Life Humanitarian Organization. We were the ones who reconstructed 4 villages and helped more than 4,000 people eat and live as they deserved. She looked at Linda for a moment. We received close to $400 million in donations, and we would like to help on the government side. But she eyed Linda a little longer. Our donations stopped coming, or more so, our biggest donors stopped with the founding. Well, a lot of things happened, Olivia. Maybe they ran with their wealth when our situation began. You know, a lot of criminal organizations donate large portions of money and… James Bellini. She interrupted Linda. What I am here for today is to ask you to allow James Bellini to use the National Bank to donate his money and help others. My organization cannot accept foreign banks because of the sanctions, and that's why he stopped. I don't know who James Bellini is. Attorney General. Everybody knows who James Bellini is. Chapter 398. James Bellini. Linda did not know what to say or even how to react to the situation in front of her, because even though she had been through many terrible things in her life and had learned how to stay calm in dangerous moments, she was never good at lying to people, especially not when the person sitting in front of her came with a reason that sounded honest and good. It was much easier to lie when the other person was greedy, selfish, or only cared about themselves, because then Linda could simply tell herself that they deserved it. But this was different because the woman sitting in front of her was talking about helping people, about using money to support others, about making sure children, poor families, and sick people had a chance to survive. And that made it much harder for Linda to think clearly. And of course, Linda had no idea that James had ever donated money to anyone. Nobody had mentioned it before. That was why Linda could not stop herself from thinking about it. If James had really been donating money, then how had nobody noticed? How had nobody talked about it? How had someone like James managed to send large amounts of money to different organizations without people asking questions or realizing where it came from? Though the answer was easy. Of course it was Danny. Danny knew how to make money travel through different accounts, businesses, fake names, and shell companies until nobody could tell where it had started or where it had ended. If James wanted money to reach an organization without his own name being connected to it, Danny could make it happen with almost no effort at all. Of course, Linda didn't know about Danny, but all of it made her think about one more thing, the most important question of all. How the fuck does Olivia know that it was James who donated the money? In Linda's mind, it was impossible to know when the money went through different companies, different banks, and of course under different names, and she was sure there was no way James had used his real name to donate that money, because that would be a fucking joke. Well, I don't know who James Bellini is, but you can enlighten me, Linda said as she leaned back in her chair. It was obvious she could not just openly tell a civilian that she actually knew who he was and that they were working together. If he is a rich businessman, then he probably already abandoned the city, just like many of them did after the operation against criminals started. You know, half of our billionaires and millionaires ran away. Billionaire Hill is full of empty mansions now. It was true. Linda was not lying about that. The government had even made statistics and forecasts about what would happen to the economy if a large part of the rich left the city. The solution was simple. Freeze all of their bank accounts and take everything they owned inside the city, and that was exactly what they did. Still, Linda's words were mostly bait for Olivia, because there was no way she was going to say out loud that James was a criminal or a drug lord. Because if she did, she would be putting herself into a criminal case as well. An organization that accepted millions from a criminal and more so now asking to let him use more of his money. It doesn't need to be hidden anymore. Olivia's voice was strange, shaky, almost breaking, yet she forced a small smile. Hide? Linda asked cautiously. The fact that James Bellini, that he's the most powerful criminal in the city, that he works with the government and with you. Olivia's eyes locked onto Linda. I don't want to be disrespectful. I really don't. But Linda, people are asking questions now. Everyone who knows him, everyone who depends on him, they're all asking the same thing. Where is he? Why isn't he helping them? They're waiting for him more than they're waiting for the government. Whole neighborhoods whisper his name. Thousands of people, silent, just waiting for him. That's why I'm here. Olivia leaned back in her chair, her hands curling into fists. I'm talking about James Bellini, the one who helped thousands of people with his money. And those people don't give a single fuck if that money was bloody or not. What they care about is the fact that he helped. After all, money is money, don't you agree? The last sentence was obviously a jab at Linda, a jab at the whole government and the corruption. And it was the blunt truth, not just a jab. Linda herself stole money, and she didn't care where it was supposed to go. To help poor people, to a children's hospital, or anything else. No, she didn't care. And now Olivia said it exactly. It doesn't matter what kind of money it is. Money is money, after all. But the most important part for Linda wasn't the personal attack. No, it was the fact that Olivia was talking about thousands of people who were waiting for James. And that meant they could potentially become members of the family, soldiers in a war. And thinking about William's fucked up plan, now it just became even worse. How are you sure the money came from James? Linda's tone shifted immediately. The man who brought the money had a gun on him, with an engraving that said Bellini. He gave us the money in cash, and a little extra by check. Olivia's voice was certain, and that made Linda think. What if it wasn't even James who gave the money, but one of his men? Linda knew James had handed out a lot of money to his top men. Maybe it was all a mistake. Or maybe Olivia had misunderstood it, thought there was nothing to do about it. And while Linda's day was far over, so she needed to be quick with it. James has suffered a lot of losses, and right now he's helping his own. So I don't know when he'll step forward, but I'll try to help with the donation if he wants to. Losses? Olivia asked immediately. Yeah, a lot of his men died. A lot of them are still under the rubble. Even he was injured. So, right now, there's chaos everywhere. But when the time comes, I'll tell him about you. Chapter 399, Confusion and the Red Folder. It took some time for Olivia to fully understand the words and the meaning behind what Linda had just told her, and for a moment, she looked completely shocked, which honestly felt strange even to Linda herself. The earthquake destroyed many lives, killed countless people, and even now many of the bodies still had not been found. But seeing Olivia's reaction made it feel as if she truly believed James was untouchable or something like that, because her eyes were filled with worry, and the more Linda looked at her, the more confused she became, even though she already knew the reason behind Olivia's concern. It was not really about helping others. It was about the power that came with helping others, and it was honestly obvious that Olivia was not only here because she wanted to save people, because by helping people she would also gain power, recognition, and influence. It was a little hard to explain, but Linda understood it very well. Olivia wanted to use James's money to help people, yes, but at the same time, by helping them she would become more important in their eyes. People would start talking about her and her organization. They would place their hopes on her. They would stand by her side. And sadly, in this country, and especially in this capital, everything was rotten to the core with corruption, and without power it was almost impossible to succeed. Though corruption was not really the right word when it came to Olivia. Olivia truly wanted to help people, because she had all the tools for it. She had volunteers, workers, and people willing to support her cause. But for a humanitarian organization to truly have freedom and the ability to work properly, it needed connections and protection, and Linda knew that very well, because many humanitarian organizations had stopped working and disappeared over the years because of the government itself. There was even a law for it, though on paper it sounded reasonable. The government claimed that every humanitarian organization needed a special permit in order to operate legally, because they said it was necessary to prevent fraud, fake charities, money laundering, and foreign influence. At first, most people agreed with it, because it sounded like the government was only trying to protect donations and make sure the money actually reached the people who needed it. But over time, people started realizing that the law was not really about protection. Every organization had to go through endless inspections, paperwork, interviews, and background checks, and even after all of that, most applications were still rejected without any clear reason. Some groups waited years for approval and never got it, while others were shut down after suddenly losing their permits. At the same time, the government kept promoting its own humanitarian department, telling people that it was safer, more reliable, and easier to trust than private organizations. Rich businessmen, celebrities, and even billionaires started donating there instead, because they did not want problems with the government or accusations that they were funding illegal groups. In the end, the law gave the government complete control over who was allowed to help people and who was not. That was why Linda immediately knew something was strange when Olivia said who she was and what kind of work she did. Because there was no way Olivia could run an organization like that without connections, and not just small connections either. Someone powerful had to be protecting her, because without protection, the government would have buried her in paperwork, frozen her accounts, or shut her down completely. In short, the government created the law so they could control where the donations went, and in the end, most of the money ended up in their hands instead. They called it regulation and public safety, but everyone knew that a large part of those funds never reached the people who actually needed help, though at least now Linda finally had her answer. James helped her get a permit. That doesn't make any sense at all, Linda thought, because in her mind it seemed completely impossible. James was far too busy with his own empire, and even if, somehow, he had managed to find the time, the idea that it could remain hidden seemed absurd. Someone would have had to notice, someone would have had to talk. Whether it was one of the officials, one of the bureaucrats, or even one of the countless people who knew James's moves, there was no way the process could have gone completely unseen. The more she thought about it, the less sense it made. It was one thing for someone to secure a permit through normal channels. It was another entirely to do it without leaving a single trace, without anyone noticing. Olivia, do you even know what James looks like? Have you ever actually seen him yourself? Or did you just see the gun and the engraving on it? The man who came to you, did he have anything unique? Scars, tattoos, anything? Just the gun. Olivia admitted, her voice steady, but Linda could tell she was holding something back. There was a certainty in her words, yes, but also restraint. Everybody knows him by name. How did that man look? Hair, skin, eyes, how tall was he? Linda pressed further. I can't tell you that. Olivia said now even more firmly, almost as if she hadn't even allowed herself to think about it. I made a promise. That was enough for Linda. Whoever the man with the money had been, it was not James, and that much was obvious. First, James always has bodyguards with him after what happened. He never moves alone. Second, he never reveals his gun unless it is absolutely necessary, and sometimes he doesn't even carry one at all. And there is no way, not with his bad leg and the pain he lives with every day, that he could carry that much cash in a bag. But if it wasn't James, then who was the man, and why did he do all of this? It had to be. There was a knock on the door again, faster this time, and before Linda could even react properly, one of her secretaries stepped in, holding a red folder in her hand, and with that in that instant, Linda snapped back to reality, realizing just how much time she had wasted talking with Olivia, while people outside were still dying and waiting for help, and more so the fact that the folder in the secretary's hand was red, which meant something was fucked once again. Well, like I said, I can talk to him. Linda began, trying to sound calm. But it will take time. There are losses on his side, delays, and maybe it would be better if you went and talked to him yourself. She smiled faintly as she stood up from the chair, glancing at Olivia, who had stayed seated, stunned into silence. The hesitation on Olivia's face, shock and surprise mixed together, made Linda pause for just a moment, realizing that her words might have sounded reckless, like she was sending Olivia straight into danger. But then Olivia stood up too, and they shook hands and Olivia turned and left, and as Linda watched her go, and only then did she fully realize that she might have said the wrong thing at the wrong time, that perhaps suggesting Olivia go herself had been careless. But the words were already out, and there was nothing she could do to take them back. And it didn't matter, not really. There were bigger things happening, lives at stake that needed attention, and waiting any longer, debating what was or wasn't the right choice, was no longer an option. The world outside her office didn't care about timing or hesitation. It just kept moving, and she had to move with it. And well, when she opened the red folder, she just realized that she truly wasted time, because something big was happening. Is this real? She asked as looked up at her secretary, and her eyes were just widened in disbelief. Yes, and they want you to write an announcement about it. The secretary began. Or, more precisely, they want you to make up a story that a fight broke out, that things got out of control, and that there was no other way to handle it than this. And who was sent to deal with it? Linda asked as she looked up from the folder. Benjamin. The silence was just pure shock, because the red folder in front of Linda was about something she hadn't even thought about. The prisons were hit too, and one of the prisons had been taken over by the inmates, and while the one sent to handle it was him. Benjamin, or more accurately, Benjamin Bellini. And well, after the operation, Linda knew she didn't just need to write an announcement. She had to fucking create a cover-up story for a massacre because she knew that Benjamin would fucking kill everybody in that prison. Chapter 400, Handle It. While others were helping people, clearing rubble, pulling out survivors, cooking food, or mourning their loved ones, Benjamin was on the complete opposite side of it all. Instead of helping, he was killing, or at the very least planning to kill. I thought this was the most secure prison in the entire country. Benjamin began as he stood on the small hill where a guard post had been before the earthquake struck, looking down at the prison itself. So how does an earthquake suddenly let those fuckers take over? Indeed, Benjamin knew it well as he stood in front of the well-known Harmon prison, the prison that held death row inmates and was considered one of the most secure facilities outside the capital city, but now it had been taken over by those fuckers inside. Well, sir, the prison director began. The power went out immediately when the earthquake hit, and the backup generators didn't start, and with it the cell locks failed. He glanced at Benjamin. The guards tried to operate them manually, but by the time they reached the control points, the inmates had already left their cells. Then why didn't the guards just shoot them? Benjamin's voice came again, though he seemed bored a bit, but the director knew that every answer he gave could make things worse for him, but he still answered. Sir, it was chaos. Absolute chaos. Some guards were overpowered, beaten, even killed. Others had their weapons taken by the inmates. A few were evacuated in time, but the main gates couldn't be secured. By the time anyone tried, the inmates had already spread through the facility. But you, Benjamin said slowly, you and your guards, you swore an oath. You are paid, trained, and tasked to keep this prison safe, aren't you? Did that oath mean anything? Did it matter at all? Silence, as the director knew the answer as clearly as Benjamin did. He had abandoned his post the moment everything went wrong. He and his men had been trained for disasters, fires, riots, even natural disasters, but when it came, instinct had overpowered duty. They had left the prison, leaving it in the hands of the very people they were meant to control. Forget about the oath, forget about your men, forget about all that, he said, as turned toward the director. Tell me what weapons they have. What could the inmates possibly get their hands on? Automatic rifles, bulletproof vests, pistols, tear gas, and a significant amount of ammunition, he said, avoiding Benjamin's gaze. I'm sure they accessed everything. All 400 inmates are armed now. Well, Benjamin said as he turned toward the prison director, his expression unreadable. You are dismissed from your position, and you are going to be arrested. So do you have any last words? The director said nothing. He only lowered his head and slowly shook it, as if he already knew there was nothing he could say that would matter anymore. No excuse would save him. No explanation would undo what had happened. With that, one of the agents stepped forward, pulled his hands behind his back, cuffed him, and led him away without another word. It was honestly surprising. Benjamin could have shot him right there, and everyone standing around knew it. Under different circumstances, with a different Benjamin, maybe he would have. But he did not even reach for his weapon. He just stood there, staring toward the prison walls like his mind was somewhere else. So what's the plan? Another agent asked as he walked up beside Benjamin. He was one of the commanders of the unit, an older man named David who had worked with Benjamin long enough to notice when something was wrong. Good question, Benjamin muttered as he looked back toward the prison. There are 400 inmates in there. All of them are death row prisoners, and now they have weapons, maybe even hostages if they managed to grab some guards before they escaped. He turned toward David. Did we receive anything from higher-ups? Any orders? Any suggestions? Benjamin asked, because in truth he had only been told to get there and deal with it. Nothing, David replied. Well, not really. They just said to make sure we handle it before it gets worse. He paused for a moment before speaking again. But is there a problem? Problem? Benjamin looked back at him, confused. What do you mean? David hesitated for a second, because even he was not fully sure how to explain it. Benjamin was acting strangely. He was quieter than usual, slower, less aggressive. But now he was just staring at the walls. You seem a little disconnected, David finally said. Oh, that's my bad, Benjamin began. I mixed up my pills this morning and ended up taking a sedative instead, and now I feel like an empty shell, like I'm walking around without emotions or something." He glanced toward David. "I don't even know what kind of sedative that was, but it hit me hard." He giggled at himself. "But none of that matters right now." He looked back toward the prison walls. "We still need to handle this situation." "It really hit you hard." David laughed. "But yeah, we need to deal with this, so what's the plan? Should we warn them first, or maybe order them to come out and surrender?" "No." Something changed the moment that single word left Benjamin's mouth. It was like the real Benjamin had finally returned, and David noticed it immediately. That coldness in his eyes and the way his voice came. "They know exactly what they've done," Benjamin said as he looked toward the prison. "All 400 of them know they are already on death row, which means that the moment they took over this prison, killed guards, and armed themselves, they made it clear they were never planning to surrender, and in doing so they turned their death sentences into immediate executions." A faint smile appeared on his face as he turned back toward David. "So we're going to handle their execution." Chapter 401, The Plan. Maybe the sedatives really dulled Benjamin's emotions and turned him into a shell of a human being who barely felt anything, but one thing was certain. Those 400 inmates inside the prison were all on death row, which meant they were already waiting for the day the government would kill them anyway. Every single one of them had already been sentenced. Every single one of them had already run out of appeals, out of chances, and out of time. In theory and in practice, Benjamin was only speeding up something that was already going to happen sooner or later, and that mattered for many reasons. One of those reasons was that even death row inmates still had families, and those families were going to protest no matter what happened. They were going to cry in front of cameras, stand outside government buildings with signs in their hands, and scream that their loved ones had been murdered. They would act like the men who died were innocent, act like they had been good fathers, good sons, or good husbands, while completely ignoring the crimes that put them behind bars in the first place. That was why Linda was given the job of creating a story that people would believe, but in truth, there was not even much that needed to be changed, because the reality itself was already enough. The death row inmates had taken over the prison, armed themselves with whatever they could find, taken hostages, and even killed guards during the chaos. That alone was enough to justify Benjamin's actions, and moreover, even if immediate execution orders would sound harsh to some people, but to most of the public it would make perfect sense. People feared prisoners, especially dangerous prisoners, and once they heard that guards had died and hostages had been taken, they would stop caring about human rights very quickly. Fear always made people accept things they normally never would. The story was simple, believable, and easy to accept. Nobody would call it inhuman, especially because the national emergency gave the government enough power to do almost anything they wanted. People already loved the way they killed gang members, mafia leaders, and corrupt politicians during the operation, which meant killing criminals who were already waiting to die would not seem like such a terrible thing. Most people would not care and moreover would probably even support it. Though on the other hand, the real problem was never whether they should kill them or not. The real problem was how they were going to do it. "How should we do it?" David asked as he stood beside Benjamin on the same hill as before. Only now, there was a mobile operations center set up behind them, which was nothing more than a large military tent filled with tables, radios, and laptops, and more importantly, there was a detailed blueprints of the prison showing every hallway, every cell block, every guard tower, and every underground maintenance tunnel, but the best thing they had access to was the security camera system. Several screens inside the tent showed live footage from different parts of the prison. They could see prisoners build barricades. They could see bodies of the guards lying motionless on the floor. They could see smoke rising from one of the cell blocks where something had been set on fire, and while they saw the reality that they real was armed like fucking soldiers. Benjamin did not answer David's question right away, and for a few seconds he just stood there in silence while staring at the screens in front of him, almost like he was no longer even inside the tent with everyone else. The dangerous look David had seen in his eyes earlier was gone now, and instead Benjamin looked bored, disappointed, almost annoyed by what he was seeing on the cameras. It was like he had expected something far bigger than this. "Boss, I thought they would try to escape, maybe use the hostages to make a deal with us. Ask for helicopters, vehicles, money, safe passage, something like that. because that would at least make sense. His voice sounded cold, but there was also disappointment in it. But instead they barricaded themselves inside the prison like idiots. He looked at one of the screens where prisoners were moving tables and beds in front of a hallway entrance. I really thought this would turn into a good shootout, a real fight between us and them. But this is just a joke. I am sure. That is still the plan. David began. They probably want to exchange the guards for freedom and a way out. Yeah, Benjamin said quietly before finally turning toward David, and he felt it again. That same look in Benjamin's eyes that made it obvious he had already made his decision and that nobody inside that prison was going to leave alive. Unfortunately for them, I am not that kind of person. Benjamin said. What about the guards? They will die heroic deaths. They will get medals, speeches, flags on their coffins, and politicians will stand in front of cameras talking about sacrifice and bravery, but it's on them. He glanced at David. They made mistakes. They failed to follow the rules, failed to secure the prison properly, and failed to open fire when they had the chance. It is all on them. Sounds good, but how? David asked. We can't send in teams. These, Benjamin said as he pointed at the blueprint of the prison spread across the table in front of them. His finger moved across several marked lines running through the walls and ceilings of the prison. All of these are part of the ventilation system. He looked up at David, and the disappointment from earlier was gone now. We are going to gas them out. We pump gas through the ventilation system, fill every hallway, every cell block, every room, and force them out into the open. David looked down at the blueprint again as Benjamin pointed toward the main exits of the prison. We place men here, and here with machine guns, and the moment they run outside, we shoot every single one of them. But if they stay inside, then they die in there too. Not even one single drop of emotions in his voice, in his ire, or on his face as he explained the easiest way to kill 400 prisoners. Chapter 402, Problem. The plan was clear, and it took about half an hour to make it even better and more precise as they carefully studied every blueprint, every hallway, every cell block, and every possible escape route inside the prison, making sure there were no blind spots, no mistakes, and no places where anyone could survive or escape once the operation started. After that, the preparations began, and that part took far longer than anyone expected. They did not have the gas they needed, or more exactly, they did not have the chemicals required to create it, which meant they had to delay the operation and send out another team to collect everything they needed. It took more than an hour for the agents to find the chemicals, load them into vehicles, and transport them back to the prison site. And even after the chemicals arrived, the work was not over. The team still had to figure out how much gas would be needed to fill an entire prison facility, how long it would take to spread through the building, and whether it would even be strong enough to kill everyone inside before people had a chance to escape, hide, or fight back. They spent more time testing the mixture, adjusting it, and making sure it was deadly enough. And when they were done, the next problem appeared. As the prison director had already explained, the electricity inside the facility had been shut down, but the backup generators were not running. Because of that, the ventilation system and the air conditioning were not working, which was bad as the prison had very little natural airflow, which meant the gas could not simply be released outside and expected to drift through the building on its own. There was a serious risk that the gas would leak back out through the wrong vents, spread into the open air, and kill the people operating it before it even reached the prisoners inside. So they spent even more time trying to find a solution, studying the ventilation maps and tracing every vent line through the building until someone finally came up with the answer. They would pump the gas directly into the ventilation system. More hours passed as agents were sent out again, this time to find air pumps strong enough to force the gas through the entire ventilation network of the prison. They needed machines powerful enough to push the gas through every hallway, every cell block, every office, every stairwell, and every room inside the building without leaving any dead zones behind. When the pumps finally arrived, the teams connected them to the ventilation system and tested them over and over again, checking pressure levels, airflow speed, and how quickly the gas would spread once it entered the building. By the time everything was finally ready, hours had passed, but at least they were ready to kill everybody inside. But of course that was the time when the main problem popped out of nowhere. Who are you two? Benjamin asked as soon as he heard the shouting and what sounded dangerously close to a fight coming from outside of the tent, and the moment he stepped outside, he saw one of his agents trying to hold back a woman, while another agent stood in front of a man. At first glance, Benjamin assumed they were family members of one of the prisoners, people desperate enough to break through security just to get answers. But the longer he looked at them, the more they seemed far too official for that. The woman was dressed in a dark coat, holding a folder, while the man beside her carried himself with the confidence of someone who believed he had the authority to walk anywhere he wanted without being stopped. "We are members of the Human Rights Committee," the woman shouted as she yanked her arm away from the agent gripping her wrist. "And this is outrageous." "Outrageous," Benjamin repeated, staring at her in disbelief. "You trespassed into an active federal operation and assaulted. We are officials sent by the union, and we have every right to be here." The man interrupted before Benjamin could finish, and the second those words left his mouth, Benjamin already knew this situation was going to become far more complicated than he had originally expected. The only type of person that Benjamin hated more than anything were these two. Members of a committee that was a fucking joke itself. A committee that ruled over the execution of several rapists, school shooters, serial killers, molesters, and so on, because they are human too. Though the truth was, Benjamin should have expected something like this to happen. There was already a massive response from the union because of the earthquake and the destruction. Committees, organizations, inspectors, and observers had been arriving one after another ever since the crisis began, each one wanting access, information, and someone to blame. Still, Benjamin had never seriously considered that the Human Rights Committee would actually show up here of all places. That was what made this even worse. This entire operation had been placed under restriction classification for a reason, which meant only a very small number of people were supposed to know about it in the first place. And yet somehow, despite all of that, the Human Rights Committee had still shown up. Oh really? The HRC? Wow. Benjamin shook his head with a dry laugh. "Well, I do not care, and I will not care. So please leave before I put both of you under arrest, and another HRC member has to be sent here to investigate what happened to you too. You are threatening union officials, not the lady." Benjamin cut her off before she could finish. "First, we are already under sanctions by the union." He stepped closer and looked directly into her eyes. "Second, we left the HRC 2 years ago, just like we left the High Court of the Union. So your little badge and whatever authority you think it gives you means absolutely nothing here." He did not look away for even a second. "So leave. It will be another charge then," the man said. "Huh?" Benjamin turned toward him. "There are already 6 criminal charges against you filed by the High Court, and now this will be the 7th. He laughed. It was slow, genuine laughter as he stepped toward the man. "Arrest me then," Benjamin said, reaching his hands out toward him. "Go ahead. Cuff me right now." Silence fell, and for a brief moment the opportunity was there, the cuff hanging at the man's side right next to his HRC badge. But that silence didn't last long. Every single agent standing around them lowered their hands toward their weapons, and one after another, the sound of safeties on guns being switched off broke the silence. "So, are you going to arrest me?" Chapter 403, The Midnight Massacre. It was obvious that there was no way they were even going to try to arrest Benjamin, because if they had tried something like that they would have been dead in a second, and everyone in the room knew it even if they did not want to admit it out loud. More than that, Benjamin was right in what he said, because they had no real power anymore in this place. Since the moment William became the president, everything changed, and he removed all the committees and all the groups that used to watch over corruption cases, suspicious deaths, and even basic human rights issues. So there was no outside control left that could actually stop anything happening here. So in short, these useless men and women could do nothing at all. But still they walked up to Benjamin like they were some kind of gods, acting like they could do whatever they wanted just because they had a union badge on their side, as if that alone gave them real authority in a place like this. "I thought so," Benjamin said as he slowly pulled his hand back. "And it is illegal to carry handcuffs and a badge here, because it has no authorization in this country, which could lead to serious changes, so please leave before I myself arrest both of you." Human rights. The woman's voice suddenly came from behind Benjamin. "It is about human rights, even if they are prisoners. They are humans just like you, and they deserve to have rights. Lady, they killed guards and even took hostages, Do you really think this is the right time to? My work is human rights, and they deserve rights. She cut Benjamin off. The right to negotiation and even the right to. At that moment, Benjamin suddenly started to laugh again. And even though it sounded like laughter, David could clearly recognize the difference in it, because it was not joy at all. It was the kind of laugh that comes when someone is already past their limit, when frustration and anger become so much that all that is left is laughter. They are all death row inmates. David began stepping forward, because he knew it would be better to speak carefully if he wanted to avoid a bigger conflict with the Union. So he took the words from Benjamin's position and continued them. The execution rules were changed not long ago, and millions of people signed for it. A democracy is based on the voice of the people, and your human rights voice is not what is being heard in this country right now. More so, there are official documents in the tent. Another commander from the group added. All of the families personally requested to see the executions. All 400 death row inmates have victim families who requested to witness it, and most of them chose hanging because it is the longest process. You can say whatever you want, lady, but their human rights are now in the hands of the victims' families, and they made their choice, and they do not care about your objections. Their faces said everything, as if they had just heard something completely otherworldly, something they could not fully understand, because to them it sounded impossible, like a reality that should not even exist in the first place. That was the difference between the two worlds. In one world, they were used to giving criminals rights, treating every situation through rules and systems that protected even those who had done the worst things, but now they had stepped into a place where none of that mattered anymore, a place where the only real right left for certain people was to die, and to die in a way where the victims' families could watch it and witness every single moment of it without being stopped. For the woman and the man, it felt like something pulled out of a distorted version of justice that should not be possible in any civilized system, and their minds struggled to accept it even while it was standing right in front of them. But on the other side, for Benjamin and for every single agent standing there, it was completely normal, something simple and obvious, something that did not need explanation or debate. Why the fuck would anyone protect death row inmates by talking about their rights, as if they were the ones being wronged? They had already lost any claim to normal rights the moment they committed what they did, and to him it was not even a debate anymore. It was just reality, something so obvious that arguing against it felt completely surreal in itself. One of them cut off the head of a young girl and did unthinkable things to her body. One of them massacred an entire family for just $12, and there are many more like that. Benjamin began as he looked straight at the woman. You know, every single one of them deserves torture in the worst possible way for months, because they do not deserve a quick death. It is too easy for them. There is nothing pushing them to feel what they made others feel. But instead of that, we are giving them this freedom to die. She finally noticed it, the way Benjamin looked at her. In that moment, she understood something she should have realized earlier, that she had walked in here with her clean ideas about human rights and rules and protection, and she had pointed them at the wrong person. She was arguing with a man who had led the infamous massacre known inside the Union as the Midnight Massacre, a coordinated operation that ended with the elimination of hundreds of people. And now, standing in front of him, she was slowly realizing that the man she was trying to lecture about human rights was the same one who had already crossed every line she believed could not be crossed. Yeah, that what she was standing in front of was not just a man arguing a point, but a mindset built from blood, violence, and absolute certainty, where her words meant nothing and her authority meant even less. Please leave before. Benjamin once again got interrupted, but now not by somebody, but by the ringtone of his phone, and as he pulled it out from his pocket, his eyes suddenly widened because it just fit the whole scene so much. Because death himself was calling him. The Angel of Death. Chapter 404, Lonely. Benjamin's face changed again. It was almost like he was smiling for no real reason, like someone special had just called him and made his mood shift in an instant. And of course he changed because it was James who was calling him, and he cared about nothing at that moment. Didn't care about the HRC members or the fact that he was supposed to deal with a whole prison operation. No, James mattered more to him than anything else. They had not talked in a long time, so seeing James calling him now meant something important. In Benjamin's mind, it always meant either something very good or something very bad. James, Yeah, it's me, Benjamin. How are you? A bigger smile spread across Benjamin's face as soon as he heard James's voice. Even more than that, James had asked how he was doing. That alone made Benjamin feel like a fan meeting someone he admired, though he knew James was not calling just to check on him. I am good. What about you? Benjamin asked. Good, but I need to ask for some help. James said. Help? Yes. Almost everything got damaged by the earthquake, and we need extra hands to move and receive some of the remaining product we still have. I already sent a lot of my men home to their families, and I also lost many of them. So, can you send some guys to help us? Of course I can. But what about you? Benjamin continued. Are you all right? I heard you got hurt too. I am fine. I just fell, that's all. James answered. That's good to hear. I am working right now, so give me a day and I will send them to help, okay? That would be good. Thank you. James answered, but this time, his voice felt different to Benjamin. It sounded tired, like he had not been resting properly, and while Benjamin had already received the reports, James had lost a lot of men, even more resources. But the worst part was not just the physical loss. It was the people. His men had lost family members and were severely demoralized. So James had done the only thing he could do. He sent them home to let them search for their loved one and mourn them. And now, he was left with only a handful of people he could actually work with. What did he say? Hector asked. He said he will send people tomorrow, so we are good. James replied while looking at Hector. Hector did not look happy about it. In fact, he looked like he was still trying to accept the situation they were in. How surreal is it? James said after a short pause, shaking his head a little. To have to ask an agency for help? I did not even once think we would reach a level where we would need to do that. Hector said. His voice was lower now, more serious. I would normally be against it, but right now, we really need help, or we will just cease to exist. What a twist that would be, James said with a small laugh. The Bellini family's end, caused by an earthquake. Silence followed his words because it had truth in it. All the warehouses had been destroyed. It was not just damage, it was complete collapse. And as if the earthquake was not enough, heavy rain had followed during the night. Because of that, even the white magic that had been packed and stored was ruined. Water mixed with the rubble, soaking everything, destroying what was left. The entire logistics chain they depended on was now completely broken. And then came the people. 106 were confirmed dead. 40 were still missing. So what James had said as a joke before was not really a joke at all. It was the truth Hector did not want to say out loud. What about Bella and Charlotte? I didn't call them. They arrived safely and now with your mother. But of course, Charlotte was crying and swearing at you, saying you betrayed her. Huh. James turned slightly toward Hector. Well, that is kind of true. He let out a small laugh again. But it had to be done. I feel like we get fucked every single time when we are together. Don't you think this will have some effect on her? I mean, she is still a child. Hector said. You compared her to a dog, don't you remember? James smiled slightly. But I am sure she will understand why I did it. And let's be honest, a child cannot stay with me. Though I really lied to her many times, James continued. But all of those lies were to protect her. But it just feels a bit odd. Odd? Hector asked. When we came back, I said something to Charlotte. James went on. Some wise words. I told her how to control things, how to be a Bellini, how to act like the mafia, how to take power over others. He shook his head slightly. And then just hours later, an earthquake hits. James smiled again, but it was a strange kind of smile. It is. Like my words to her, or my last lesson. Like I was preparing her for something final. Nothing. Of course Hector said nothing, because he was not sure what James meant. It sounded like James was losing his mind a little, but at the same time, there was still some truth in what he said. James had told Charlotte something that day. How to be a Bellini, how to be in the mafia, how to control others, how to win power. And just hours later, the earthquake came. But the way James spoke about it, like the earthquake was sent by someone to kill him, made it sound like something only a crazy person would say. Crazy, huh? James said, but this time his laugh was genuine. But think about it. As soon as Charlotte stepped into our life, all the shit happened. Like if she is a magnet to death. I mean, that is true. Hector answered as he thought about it. And well, yeah, all the shit happened as soon as Charlotte stepped into their life. But now it can change again. Maybe a new era comes. What do you mean? James asked as he had no idea what Hector meant by new era, as they were the ones who had already created it. You sent Hans's daughter to Marcy too, so Charlotte will have someone her age to stay with. Also, Ferrucci is there, so when he finally wakes up he will be with them. The era comes back when it was just us. Now there was silence from James as he looked to the side where the house had collapsed during the earthquake, just watching it, and maybe deep down he started feeling the same collapse, but now he was accepting it rather than resisting it, as he leaned back on the bench in the garden. Maybe this is the sign. He glanced at Hector, that the end will be lonely. Chapter 405, The Stranger. That is depressing. You should not say things like that, Hector said, even though he felt the same way inside, as his eyes moved slowly toward the side of the house, and it truly looked more like a sign than anything else. It all felt like nothing ever worked out for them, because in the last second, something always came and ruined everything. And this earthquake did exactly that, but on a scale that was simply too much to even think about. Everything just got destroyed, and millions upon millions were lost, wiped away like they meant nothing. It was almost like a metaphor, and that was what James meant by it too, because the house, the family house that had already been reinforced to withstand attacks from the feds and from everyone who ever tried to make them fall, collapsed to the ground as if it was nothing, and it became a perfect reflection of them. The family that had been built from nothing, that went through so much just to reach the top, had now fallen apart within days. I am not depressed, it is just too much. Why did this need to happen right now? James said with a sigh. Cartel, war, and now an earthquake that destroyed everything. We even lost men too. So why now? Maybe we deserved it, not just me, but the whole country, Hector said as he slowly stood up. But all of this chaos also gave us something on a golden plate. So what do you say, James, should we do it? You know what is the funny thing about all of this, Hector? James asked as he slowly stood up as well, putting his weight on the cane. That my morality is telling me to stop this, he said with a faint smile as he looked up at Hector. But sadly, morality does not mean anything anymore. I made the deal with Damien, and Camillo said that he will buy whatever remains. So yes, Damien first, and then Camillo when Benjamin Mann arrives. Something felt different again as Hector looked at him, because it was like he was seeing another version of James, like he had changed once more, or maybe it was just the way he stood there that made it feel that way. The black overcoat, the black cane, the new scar on his face, his eyes, the Bellini signet ring, and the butterfly one that he bought with Charlotte, all of it together made him look like a true Don. Then I will send our men to start packing the trucks. Good, I will go and make some food, James replied as he waved his hand, and with that, he walked back to the side of the house that was still standing, while Hector went to the others to prepare the deal that would bring them even more money. And morally, it was truly wrong, and it was not even the original deal that James had agreed on with Damien. Originally, the deal was that James would use the 3D printers to make drones and weapons, which Damien would have paid for with good money, while also giving connections that would allow them to make even more. And it was not just a simple deal, but something that involved infrastructure, logistics, manpower, and much more. But it all got cut short because of the earthquake. Yet the miracle was that the only warehouse that stayed standing was the one where all the weapons and drones were stored, along with the industrial 3D printers. So James called Damien to make another deal, and surprisingly, it went smoothly. And in a strange way, the earthquake helped with that too, because Damien had also been hit by it, and now he needed a large supply of weapons to satisfy his buyers. So the deal was made. A deal where Damien bought everything, all the drones, all the 3D printed weapons, and even the weapons that James's men were using, along with the printers themselves. All of it was worth $200 million, or at least it could have been, but it still needed to be shipped. So Damien said he would cut it down to $180 million, and the remaining $20 million would cover the shipping, which James agreed to, and that was where the moral part came in. Damien would use 2 cargo planes under the flag of the International Rescue and Aid Committee to fly in, pack up everything, and then fly out. He said he could do it because he could acquire all the necessary licenses and permits, but the real problem was that he was sending in 2 large planes, which meant that real rescue and aid teams would not be able to land. And that meant that people would definitely die. But it needed to be done. And James knew he did so much that hell already awaits for him, or something much worse. So rather than even thinking about it, he went inside the house, walking into the second kitchen that hadn't been destroyed, and he started cooking, or more like making some pancakes, just to push his thoughts away from everything that had happened. But of course, it would not be James if nothing went wrong. When he was done with 5 pancakes, and even poured syrup over them before sitting down, he noticed it. He noticed that somebody was standing outside on the patio, looking in without moving at all, and when he looked there he saw that it was a woman he had never seen in his life, just standing there and staring at him, with her hands behind her back. It was surreal and almost absurd, because there were still guards all around the house. Yet somehow a complete stranger was standing on the patio, just staring at James with anger in her eyes, her breath uneven, her clothes muddy and dirty, cuts visible on her face, and yet she did nothing else. She just stood there and stared while holding something behind her back. And while the reality quick spread, thought James's mind. No bulletproof vest, no gun on him, just a fucking plate of pancakes in his hand. Chapter 406. Hello? Am I hallucinating? James thought as the seconds passed, and not a single movement happened, as if they were just standing still, staring at each other like it was a contest or something. And it made him somehow believe that what he was seeing was just a hallucination his mind had created because she looked like that. A hallucination, or a manifestation of what had happened in the past days. A woman who looked beaten up, almost like somebody carved out of the rubble itself, now showing up just to show what James's actions were leading to, and that was death. Moreover, the thought passed through James's mind that it might be hallucinating that woman, that journalist that she killed at Marco's house, or at least thought he did. But the truth was he forgot her. He forgot how she looked, forgot her voice, forgot everything about her. The only thing he remembered was that he did it. But it made no sense, because she was breathing. She was real. She was actually there, standing and looking at him in silence like that. And James himself had already accepted death. He had accepted it a long time ago, and that was why he was not panicking at all. He was not scared, nor did he fear it. It was all just absurd, and he could not tell if it was real or not. So he chose to find out. Hello, he said. Hello. The woman answered back, but her voice was strange. Rather than anger or a will to kill him, she sounded scared, and because of that, it became even more absurd, because if she was real, then why was she just standing there like that? Do I know you? James asked, but the question itself did not really matter, because it did not change anything if she was there to kill him. I think yes. Her voice was now more scared, hesitant, and her eyes changed too, like somebody who did not even know why she was there. Not a single clue. James knew nothing about her, other than the fact that she did not look familiar at all, and there was just no chance that he had ever met her before. I am Olivia Ziegler from New Life Humanitarian Organization. The moment she said her organization name, the amount of relief that washed over James was something that could not be explained with words, because even if he had accepted death, he had still feared the fact of truly dying alone. Oh, Olivia, how could I have forgotten you? James said as he smiled and carefully put down the pancakes. Are you feeling good? Come in and sit down. He pointed to the chair, and as he said it, Olivia immediately lit up, a huge smile forming on her face as she stepped into the kitchen. And behind her back was not a weapon, but a dossier of what? Who knows? But one thing was sure. James had no idea who she was, but the organization she had just named, he knew, because that was the one Danny had talked about. When Hector came back from Arbora and announced that James had become a billionaire, it felt like a dream, nothing less. But the thing was, James did not know what to do with the money, and in truth, he did not really understand it at all. He was still young, and he had no real experience in the mafia, and the situation he was in did not really require $1 billion just to survive or stay in control, nor had he ever even imagined that he would reach something like that. So he did the only thing he thought was right. At that time, his morality spoke louder than anything else, and he knew that the family had killed a lot of people, or more so destroyed many lives, so he decided to give the money away. The man he turned to was Danny. James told him to give the money to an organization that helps others, which at first made Danny think it was a new money laundering method. But James told him that he actually wanted to help, that it had to be a real organization, so Danny started looking around for one. That was when Danny found Olivia and her organization. It was legitimate, although it had more problems than money, so Danny sent people to help her get the permits and, more importantly, to give her funding. Basically, it was James who decided to give the money, But it was not him who delivered it to her directly, nor the one who helped her in person. It was all done through Danny. And the gun she had seen, with the engraving and the family name on it, was a misunderstanding, because there is a gun manufacturer with the Bellini name. But shit, that misunderstanding led her to the truth. Though that money would mean a lot right now, but back then, that was a whole different period. Can I first ask how you even got in here? James asked as he sat down at the counter and started eating his pancakes, while Olivia, hearing the question, got a bit scared. Not just a bit. She was mostly frozen for a moment. There is a part where the fence is broken, she said, but she did not look at James. So I climbed it, and I jumped in, and I landed in a bush, and after that I ran straight here. Well, at least it explained why she was dirty and why her face was cut, but it still blew James's mind away. All the guards, the dogs, and the security, all of it, just for a woman to jump through the broken part of the fence and sprint straight toward the house. It could have ended badly for both of them, though one thing was sure. Olivia became the first person to actually break in. Chapter 407. Nothing. So what brought you here today? James asked it in a way that was far too calm for what the situation actually was, like he was asking about something ordinary and simple, not the fact that a complete stranger, someone he had never even met before, had just jumped over the fence of his house and was now sitting right in front of him like it was completely acceptable, acting as if nothing strange had happened while casually eating pancakes. Yeah, he was too comfortable, but at the same time it almost made sense, because the situation itself had already crossed so many lines that it stopped feeling real. And seeing her like this, still alive, still breathing, still sitting in front of him instead of being another dead body somehow, made James even more relaxed. But Olivia did not understand any of that, because this was the first time she had ever been in the same room as him, the first time she had ever actually seen James Bellini with her own eyes, the man people whispered about in fear and respect, the so-called Dawn of Dawns, the young man who should not have reached that level of power at his age. An anomaly of the world, but now he seemed less than that. Like she was sitting there across from him, watching him eat pancakes like it was the most normal thing in the world, and her mind could not match that image with anything she had heard before, because the stories she had been told were completely different from this quiet moment, stories that painted him as something inhuman, something closer to a monster who ruled the underworld without hesitation and removed anyone who stepped against him. The same man who was said to have poked out the police chief's eyes with his hands. The same man who had built one of the fastest rising empires in recent years. The same man who stood close to Augustus. And the worst part for her was not even the fear of what he might do, but the confusion of it all, because nothing about this moment aligned with anything she believed about him. Nothing matched the stories, nothing matched the reputation, nothing matched the idea of a man who was supposed to be feared. And yet here she was, sitting across from him, watching him eat like she was just another guest at a table. And that single thought alone made everything feel unreal, like her mind could not accept that this was the same person she had been warned about. I am sorry to say this at our first meeting, but the organization lacks funds, so we cannot help people the way we are supposed to, and now it has become even more important because of the earthquake. Her eyes were not on James as she spoke. They were fixed on the ground, like she could not bring herself to face him while saying something like this, like even she knew how it sounded, how desperate it was. Without funds, we are forced to let people die, so what you did with the money you donated before was exactly what we need again right now, because I want to help others, and I believe you also want that too. I believe you are not someone who would just ignore something like this even if people say otherwise. She stopped. She stopped the Monet. She looked up and met his eyes. Because what she saw was not sympathy, not interest, not even irritation. It was nothing. There was no emotion in James's eyes, no reaction on his face, not even the smallest sign that her words had reached him in any meaningful way. And for a second it felt like she was not even speaking to a person, but to something empty, something that simply existed without caring. He did not look angry. He did not look amused. He did not look thoughtful. He just looked like he did not care at all. And that was far worse than any reaction she had imagined before coming here, because at least anger or rejection would have meant that her words had some kind of effect. But this complete absence of feeling made everything she said feel small and meaningless. That was the exact moment she realized the truth of where she was. She had walked into the house of a lion and asked it for food. And even worse, until this very moment, she had not truly thought about the money itself, not in a deep and honest way, not in a way that forced her to face what it really meant and where it truly came from. Of course she knew. She was not stupid. She understood that it was blood money, that there was no clean way someone like him could have earned it. But she never allowed herself to think about it too deeply. She did not think about the fact that she came here to ask for money that came from other people's suffering and death. And now that thought finally reached her fully, because for the first time, she could not ignore it anymore. She understood exactly what she was asking for. She was asking for more suffering because from the suffering comes the money that then goes to support her. Somehow, she had never truly thought about it. Maybe it was because the money was simply too great, too useful, too capable of helping so many people for her to question it deeply, because every time she saw what it could do, every life it could save, every problem it could solve, it became easier to ignore everything behind it, easier to accept it without asking where it really came from. Maybe she convinced herself that the result mattered more than the source. Maybe she chose not to look too closely, because looking too closely would have made it impossible to take it in the first place. What you are asking for is money. James began as he finished the pancakes. Money for the greater good. He lifted his gaze and looked directly into her eyes, and it was impossible for her to look away. But is there even such a thing as a greater good? He leaned back slightly, because at the end of the day, everything is an exchange. You give something, you get something. That's how it works. Always. His eyes didn't leave hers. Even when people say they're helping others, they're still getting something out of it. A brief pause. Nothing is free. Nothing is ever just given without a reason. He tilted his head slightly. So tell me, what are you offering in return? What? She asked, but it wasn't even really a question. It slipped out of her mouth before she could think. I gave 200 million, if not more, so you already owe me a lot. And now you come to ask for money directly. He held eye contact without breaking. So what do you have for me? She knew from the very beginning that there had to be a catch. There was no way she could just receive that much money and owe nothing in return. She had known it, but she had chosen to avoid it, to push the thought aside. But now she couldn't avoid it. Olivia needed to answer, and she needed to do it fast, but the only answer she could give was the truth. Her truth and her greater good. In nothing. I have nothing for you. Chapter 408. Something in return. Olivia answered with her truth, placing her morality and her beliefs in the first place, because that was the very reason why she even started her whole organization in the first place, and not to create soldiers out of the people she helped, because she clearly understood that this was what James was hinting at. Though she made a mistake. Every person who received a bag of grain or a bottle of medicine knew that the money came from the pockets of James Bellini, because Olivia refused to let the government take credit for a kindness they never actually showed. She chose to be honest because she wanted the people to stop looking toward the capital for help, and she wanted them to see that the only hand reaching out to them was a hand criminal. It was a dangerous and a senseless choice to make, but she felt that the truth was better than a false hope in a system that had abandoned them a long time ago. Moreover, without James, it would have been impossible to help so many people, to provide food, free clothing, housing, medicine, and everything else they needed, and she believed that the best thing she could do was to be honest and tell people who made all of that possible, because they deserved to know the truth behind their survival. She did not want them to believe that it was some politician. She did not want them to think that the people who were supposed to help were actually doing their job, because that was not the truth. She did not want to give them false hope about the system or about the people in power, so she told them everything. She told everyone that the money came from Bellini, from James Bellini, but she never explained who he really was. She left that part for them to discover on their own, and strangely, there was not a single voice raised against it. The people did not care that the money was stained with blood because that same money paid for the doctors, food, and for a life that is worth living. Yeah, their hopes slowly gathered around James, because they already knew him in their own way. They knew the man who gave work to those who were struggling, the man who paid wages that felt almost unreal, something they had never experienced before, the same man who helped families and gave them access to private hospitals. And that alone was enough for them to believe that James Bellini was a good man, even if they understood that he was not. But in the end, that truth did not matter. What mattered was what they experienced, what they saw with their own eyes, and the simple fact that he was the only person who ever reached out to them when no one else did. It did not matter if he was a criminal or not, because he was the only one who helped, and in their eyes he slowly became something close to a hero. This was the same thing Olivia explained to Linda, and that was what she meant when she said that everyone knows James Bellini. The people who were helped by him knew exactly who he was in their own way, and through that, Olivia also made it clear to Linda that those people would not hesitate if they were asked to act. But at the same time, that was exactly what Olivia feared the most. She understood that James was not giving money only to help, but that he might expect something in return, and that something was people. People who could become soldiers, people who could become workers for the mafia. And the truth was that this had already started to happen without Olivia even realizing it, and without James even needing to ask directly. All of those people were ready to follow his orders, almost like they were following someone who had saved them and led them toward a better life. But Olivia could not accept that. Helping others should never be about turning their faith and hope into weapons. Helping people should be about creating change, about pushing that change forward, and about showing what the country could become if people truly supported each other. She did not help those people with James's money to turn them into soldiers for the mafia. Nothing. James's voice pulled her out of her thoughts, and in that moment she understood exactly what she had just done. She had said no to the Don. She had said no to the man who reshaped the entire criminal underworld with his own hands. And that was exactly why she could no longer look into his eyes, why her gaze slowly fell away as if something was forcing it down, as she began to realize more and more that she might have just walked into her own death, believing for even a moment that the Don would help without expecting anything in return, when in truth it was never about helping in the first place. "I like you." Laugh. Laugh came as James said it. "You are so pure in your motives. Helping others means a lot to you, huh?" he asked as he smiled and slowly stood up from the counter and walked toward Olivia, and while she felt it, even if James laughed, his being was still just an anomaly. The way he was walking toward her, the way the cane tapped in rhythm on the marble floor, the way he was dressed, the way the ring on his finger showed power, and the way his eyes were falling on her. It was just pure pressure for her. It was more of a test to see what kind of person you are. "I don't need soldiers, I have enough," James continued, looking into her eyes. "You know I donated because I wanted to help people, and I still want to. What I ask for is to remember me." "I'll remember," she asked back as she didn't understand what he meant. "Well, one day I am going to die," James said, always still staring into her eyes. "I want to be remembered, at least by one person, that I tried to do right." She didn't understand it at all, what was happening and why, but she felt that what James was saying was the truth coming from deep down inside him. "So I will give you money, but before that," he reached into his pocket. "Heads or tails?" "I am sorry." "Well, you broke in," James said with a single emotion in his voice. "So heads or tails?" Chapter 409, End of an Era. Olivia knew exactly what it meant, and that was exactly why her whole body was shaking. Not only her hands, but her arms, her legs, even her breathing became uneven. She had heard about it before, from the streets, from people who shared stories about James and how he liked to flip a coin, how he would let that small, simple object decide the fate of those who stood in his way, as if their lives meant nothing. They said he treated it like a game, that he enjoyed it, that he found some kind of pleasure in leaving everything to chance, and Olivia had listened to those stories many times. But she had never truly believed them. It never made sense to her. A man like James, someone young yet so powerful, someone with influence, with control, with people under him who would do anything he said, why would he rely on something like this? Why would he enjoy flipping a coin and letting it decide something so serious, something so final? What kind of mind would find enjoyment in that? It sounded unreal, like something people made up to make him seem more frightening than he already was. And yet now, she could see that everything she had heard was true. James held the coin in his palm that represented her life, her fate, and he was waiting for her to say it out loud, to choose a side, to decide which face of the coin she would place her life on, and that silence between them made it more absurd. He was not rushing her, not forcing her, not even speaking, and that made it worse. It just pushed the idea even more that this was about her, and she understood it. She knew what kind of man stood in front of her, and she knew that this was not a joke, not a rumor, not a story from the streets anymore. This was happening. Her life was being placed on a coin. And in that moment, everything she had done came back to her. Every step that led her here, every choice she made, every mistake, every desperate action, all the things she did just to get here, just to beg for money, just to try and save people, and now all of that had brought her to this exact point. To be in front of James, staring at a coin in his hand, knowing that something so small was about to decide everything. And the worst part about all of it was that James was not smiling. If he had been smiling, even just a little, Olivia could have told herself that this was some kind of act, that he was only playing, only trying to intimidate her. A smile would have meant something human, something readable, something she could hold on to and understand. But there was nothing. No smile, no anger, no excitement, not even boredom. His face was completely empty as he looked at her, simply waiting for her to pick a side, waiting for her to choose which one she would trust with her life. "You're scared, right?" James asked as he flipped the coin. "But there's no reason to be scared." "No reason," Olivia repeated, because in her mind there were 1,000 reasons to be scared, 1,000 reasons screaming at him. "I mean, you came all the way here, into my kitchen," James continued. "So why would you be scared now? You got past armed guards, past dogs, so why would you be scared at this moment?" There was logic in what he said. Olivia knew. She really had done something insane to get here. She moved like a fucking ninja, slipping past guards who would have shot her the moment they saw her. That should have been the most dangerous part. At least, that was how James saw it. But for Olivia, it was completely different. For her, this was the true danger. This moment, being in front of him, had been the most terrifying part from the very beginning, because she already knew, even before stepping inside, what kind of person she was going to face. But one thing she knew for sure from the very beginning, that something inside him is not right, that there is no way his mind works like a normal person's mind. She knew she was going to talk to someone unstable, and now it was all playing out right in front of her eyes. Because the fact that James was standing there, flipping a coin, treating this like a game, pointed to something deeper. Power. The kind of power where he could decide who lived and who died with a single coin flip, and nothing would happen to him. No one would stop him. No one would question him. The kind of power that allowed him to play with life as if it had no value, as if it was just another choice he could make without consequences. "Pick one, darling. You have been silent for a while." James' voice came, pulling her out of her thoughts. "Details," she said, her voice shaking and her eyes only just on the coin. She did not even look into James's eyes. "Good pick." His voice came, and after that he flipped it up into the air, all the way up to the ceiling, and caught it. But then, after looking at it, he reached his arm out to Olivia. "See it yourself," he said, and let the coin fall into her palm, and there it was. "What is it?" James asked, even though he was seeing it himself. "T-tails. Now look at the other side." She flipped the coin in calmness with a single shake. "Tails," she said. "You know, I am a cheater," James said with a giggle as the echoing filled her ears. "Usually I have a coin where I can change the sides, so when people pick their sides they pick their own deaths, but today is your luck. Because this coin stopped working. Maybe some dust or a little rock got into the mechanism and didn't flip the side to tails." As James was explaining it, her heart was racing so much that she felt like it was going to jump out, like she was going to die from a heartbeat rather than a bullet. Like what the fuck? She had almost died and this guy was explaining why the coin didn't work, but at least she won. Maybe it was too much, James thought, because the coin was working, but he needed to intimidate her. There was no way he was going to let her go after walking in like she owned the fucking place. But now she was looking like a fucking corpse. "James, are you here?" Another voice came, and it was a surprise to say the least. "Sophia?" James asked as he looked at her. "I haven't seen you in a long time. Where have you been?" "I have been busy," she said with a smile. "But who is she?" she asked, looking at Olivia. "A business partner," James said, which for some reason Olivia nodded to. "And she is about to leave." He looked at her. "I will escort you out. I will be back, Sophia, so we can talk because you were truly away for such a long time." "Yeah, I want to talk too," Sophia said, but something was different about her. She looked completely fine, but the way she acted was different. She wasn't all pumped up, ready to make love. But before they went outside, James checked his phone because it was buzzing like crazy, and when he looked, it was Linda. She had called him more than 20 times. "Wait," he said as he looked at Olivia. "I need to make a call. Sit back down until then," James said, and called Linda back. The phone was ringing and ringing for seconds, and then she picked up. "Why are you blowing up my phone?" "James." Linda's voice came as she shouted into the phone. "Sophia," she shouted again. "She is there too." The only thing Linda heard was gunshots ringing out. What she heard was death. The death of a Bellini. Chapter 410. Olivia knew exactly what it meant, and that was exactly why her whole body was shaking. Not only her hands, but her arms, her legs, even her breathing became uneven. She had heard about it before, from the streets, from people who shared stories about James and how he liked to flip a coin, how he would let that small, simple object decide the fate of those who stood in his way, as if their lives meant nothing. They said he treated it like a game, that he enjoyed it, that he found some kind of pleasure in leaving everything to chance, and Olivia had listened to those stories many times. But she had never truly believed them. It never made sense to her. A man like James, someone young yet so powerful, someone with influence, with control, with people under him who would do anything he said. Why would he rely on something like this? Why would he enjoy flipping a coin and letting it decide something so serious, something so final? What kind of mind would find enjoyment in that? It sounded unreal, like something people made up to make him seem more frightening than he already was. And yet now, she could see that. Everything she had heard was true. James held the coin in his palm that represented her life, her fate. And he was waiting for her to say it out loud, to choose a side, to decide which face of the coin she would place her life on. And that silence between them made it more absurd. He was not rushing her, not forcing her, not even speaking, and that made it worse. It just pushed the idea even more that this was about her, and she understood it. She knew what kind of man stood in front of her, and she knew that this was not a joke, not a rumor, not a story from the streets anymore. This was happening. Her life was being placed on a coin. And in that moment, everything she had done came back to her. Every step that led her here, every choice she made, every mistake, every desperate action, all the things she did just to get here, just to beg for money, just to try and save people, and now all of that had brought her to this exact point. To be in front of James, staring at a coin in his hand, knowing that something so small was about to decide everything. And the worst part about all of it was that James was not smiling. If he had been smiling, even just a little, Olivia could have told herself that this was some kind of act, that he was only playing, only trying to intimidate her. A smile would have meant something human, something readable, something she could hold on to and understand. But there was nothing. No smile, no anger, no excitement, not even boredom. His face was completely empty as he looked at her, simply waiting for her to pick a side, waiting for her to choose which one she would trust with her life. "You're scared, right?" James asked as he flipped the coin. "But there's no reason to be scared." "No reason," Olivia repeated, because in her mind there were 1,000 reasons to be scared, 1,000 reasons screaming at him. "I mean, you came all the way here, into my kitchen," James continued. "So why would you be scared now? You got past armed guards, past dogs, so why would you be scared at this moment?" There was logic in what he said. Olivia knew. She really had done something insane to get here. She moved like a fucking ninja, slipping past guards who would have shot her the moment they saw her. That should have been the most dangerous part. At least, that was how James saw it. But for Olivia, it was completely different. For her, this was the true danger. This moment, being in front of him, had been the most terrifying part from the very beginning, because she already knew, even before stepping inside, what kind of person she was going to face. But one thing she knew for sure from the very beginning, that something inside him is not right, that there is no way his mind works like a normal person's mind. She knew she was going to talk to someone unstable, and now it was all playing out right in front of her eyes. Because the fact that James was standing there, flipping a coin, treating this like a game, pointed to something deeper. Power. The kind of power where he could decide who lived and who died with a single coin flip, and nothing would happen to him. No one would stop him. No one would question him. The kind of power that allowed him to play with life as if it had no value, as if it was just another choice he could make without consequences. "Pick one, darling. You have been silent for a while." James' voice came, pulling her out of her thoughts. "Tea tales." she said, her voice shaking and her eyes only just on the coin. She did not even look into James's eyes. Good pick. His voice came, and after that he flipped it up into the air all the way up to the ceiling and caught it. But then, after looking at it, he reached his arm out to Olivia. See it yourself, he said, and let the coin fall into her palm, and there it was. What is it? James asked, even though he was seeing it himself. Tails. Now look at the other side. She flipped the coin in calmness with a single shake. Tails, she said. You know, I am a cheater, James said with a giggle as the echoing filled her ears. Usually I have a coin where I can change the sides, so when people pick their sides they pick their own deaths, but today is your luck. Because this coin stopped working. Maybe some dust or a little rock got into the mechanism and didn't flip the side to tails. As James was explaining it, her heart was racing so much that she felt like it was going to jump out, like she was going to die from a heartbeat rather than a bullet. Like what the fuck? She had almost died and this guy was explaining why the coin didn't work, but at least she won. Maybe it was too much, James thought, because the coin was working, but he needed to intimidate her. There was no way he was going to let her go after walking in like she owned the fucking place. But now she was looking like a fucking corpse. James, are you here? Another voice came, and it was a surprise to say the least. Sophia? James asked as he looked at her. I haven't seen you in a long time. Where have you been? I have been busy, she said with a smile. But who is she? She asked, looking at Olivia. A business partner, James said, which for some reason Olivia nodded to. And she is about to leave. He looked at her. I will escort you out. I will be back, Sophia, so we can talk because you were truly away for such a long time. Yeah, I want to talk too, Sophia said, but something was different about her. She looked completely fine, but the way she acted was different. She wasn't all pumped up, ready to make love. But before they went outside, James checked his phone because it was buzzing like crazy, and when he looked, it was Linda. She had called him more than 20 times. Wait, he said as he looked at Olivia. I need to make a call. Sit back down until then, James said, and called Linda back. The phone was ringing and ringing for seconds, and then she picked up. Why? Are you blowing up my phone? James. Linda's voice came as she shouted into the phone. Sophia, she shouted again. She is there too. The only thing Linda heard was gunshots ringing out. What she heard was death. The death of a Bellini. Chapter 411. Coin. Once again, not a single word came from anyone, but everybody understood what he meant by it, and why he shot Hector's body. It was to protect Hector's legacy. It was to protect him in the only way James knew how. To make sure that the truth stayed buried in a way that wouldn't weaken what Hector had built, or what he meant to the people who followed him. Because in the end, the only person who could kill Hector, the only one who actually did kill him, was James. His boss. Nobody else. And those who witnessed what happened, those who saw Hector die in that instant, would need to carry it forward, not to say a single word about the truth, but to say that he was killed by his own boss, which created its own fucking darkness that would spread far beyond that room, far beyond that night. But they all knew that James was accepting all of it, that if people spat on his name, if they cursed him, he would accept that too without resistance. He wouldn't fight it. He wouldn't correct it. He wouldn't even defend himself, because Hector meant so much to him that he couldn't let him be killed by anybody else. James chose to become the reason. He chose to become the name that would stain the truth, so Hector's end would not be reduced to weakness, betrayal, or randomness. If the story needed blame, he would take it all, and everyone who stood there understood it clearly in that silence. This wasn't denial, and it wasn't confusion. It was sacrifice in its ugliest form, where the person carrying it doesn't get to explain themselves, because explaining would only weaken what they were trying to protect. You were the one, Ramirez said, and he didn't cry at all. Not a single tear was in his eyes because of one simple thing. He had taken an oath to Hector that if he ever died, he would be the one to look after James. And now that time has come. Ramirez knew that now it was the next step he needed to take, not just to carry out the oath he had made to Hector, but because this could very well be the end of the family if he failed to act correctly. Because James was in a state that Ramirez could not even begin to describe. It wasn't just grief, and it wasn't just shock. It was something unstable, something that felt like it was holding on only by habit, as if the moment anyone said the wrong word, everything would collapse entirely. And for the first time, Ramirez didn't see James as a boss or as a leader. He saw him as someone standing at the edge of something irreversible, and if he didn't step forward now, there might be nothing left to save it all. The gun, James, Ramirez's voice came. It's over, so please hand it to me. For a moment, James didn't move. He just stood there, holding Hector's gun like it was the only solid thing left in the world, and indeed it was. But it wasn't just a weapon in his hand anymore. It had turned into something else entirely, something heavier than metal and engraving, something that carried the weight of everything that had just happened. Not just a tool of violence, but the final point where everything changed, where loyalty, blood, and leadership all broke in the same instant. Why would I even continue? James. Linda's voice came as she heard James clearly. Raphael, Hans, and now Hector. He had a smile on. A tired smile. James. Linda began again. Put the gun down, she said as she even reached her arms out toward him, slowly, carefully, like she was afraid one wrong movement would break whatever fragile balance was left. It's okay, Jay, just put it down. We are here. But the words didn't seem to land where they were supposed to. Not properly. Not fully. Because in James's hand, the gun wasn't just a weapon anymore. It wasn't just something that had fired or killed or ended a life. It had become something heavier than that. A seal. A final statement that couldn't be taken back. The thing that turned a moment into history, and a person into a story no one would ever tell correctly. And even as Linda reached for him, even as the others stood frozen behind her, James didn't look at them like they could fix anything anymore. He looked like someone who had already stepped too far past the point, where being pulled back felt possible. Yeah, you are here. James kept smiling. Linda, flip a coin. What? A coin. Flip one. James repeated himself as he looked deeper into her eyes, and she didn't know what it meant, or more so who the coin was meant for. And that look in James's eyes made it impossible to tell what was going on inside him. But she knew she needed to do it, so she did. With her shaking hands, she pulled out her wallet, took out a coin, and held it in her palm, waiting for James. Throw it up, Linda, James said, but she hesitated because she still didn't know who the coin was meant for. She didn't even know if James was blaming her, because she was the one who called Hector after James didn't pick up the phone. She was the one who alerted Hector about Sophia's motives. She was the one who sent Hector to his death, but in the process, she saved James. Throw it up. His voice came again, and she did it. She threw the coin up, and she didn't catch it, letting it fall into Hector's blood. Heads. Well, this is it then. James, no. It was quick. James suddenly pushed the gun to his head and pulled the trigger before Ramirez or anybody else could shoot him to stop him. And this time, the gun didn't jam. Chapter 412. The End or the Beginning. I died. James' voice came quietly as he stood in the darkness. It was not complete darkness, but something strange, a kind of shadow where he could still see. He could feel his body. He could think. He could speak. Yet around him there was nothing. Only darkness and a thin layer of fog. James, how long has it been? A voice came from behind him as he turned around, and there he was. Lucian, he asked. I knew I would meet you if I died. But this is hell? I thought there would be fire and demons. Oh, why would there be demons here? Lucian said as he walked closer. When you have your own demons. My own demons? James asked with a smile. You mean you are a demon of mine? Yeah, I might be one, but I prefer bestie over demon. Lucian laughed. Bestie, huh? James laughed as he reached out his hand, but passed through Lucian's hand, as if he was nothing but fog, as if he was not really there. Yeah, bestie, but your demons are them, Lucian said as he slowly walked through James' body, as if he wasn't even there. And as James turned back, they were all there. Raphael, Hans, the journalists he killed at Marco's house, even Marco himself, Isabella, Victor, the police chief, everyone who left something dark inside him. Torment, even after my death. Huh, Lucian? Not really, Lucian said as he turned back. To be honest, I don't know what this is. Maybe it's your mind. Maybe this is something you cannot accept. He paused. Maybe this is the beginning and the end. But one thing is sure, James, this is you. And you need to make peace with yourself, because this, Lucian pointed to his own head, will go wild. Even wilder than mine. I blew my brain out with a gun, Lucian, James said with a laugh. I think there is nothing left in there to make peace with. Lucian laughed too and shook his head. Well, yeah, You did blow your mind out. In your mind. He smiled wider. I think you have already gone crazy, because you were talking to me. No. More like you were making me talk to you. How crazy is that? What are you talking about, Lucian? I died when I... James. A shout came, and in that moment the darkness faded out, just like Lucian and everybody who was standing there. You good? Don't worry, I got you. Mike, come here. The shout came again, and James could clearly hear a familiar voice. Not just familiar, he knew the voice, but it was impossible that he was hearing it, because that voice belonged to the same person who got a bullet to his head. He was hearing Hector's voice. You good? Don't worry, James. His voice came again as his hand was pushing to James' side. Mike, I am here. Now came Mike's voice, and what James saw as his eyes opened was Mike putting on gloves, getting a bandage from his bag, and pushing it to his side. But he didn't understand what was happening. He didn't understand that it was reality. It's too much blood. We need to get him out now. Mike's voice came, but still James had no idea of it. Had no idea until the point his body was raised by Hector and Mike and his head fell to the side. He was seeing a woman with a huge amount of blood under her body. A woman who was no other than Sophia herself. What is this? Don't worry, James. I am here. We're going to get you to the hospital. Just focus on your breathing. The moment Hector said it was the exact moment James passed out. There was nothing holding him back to life. And more, he didn't even know what was happening at all. James himself pulled the trigger. He remembered it. He saw Hector's dead body. He was pushing his hand to his neck trying to save him. He saw the reaction of Ramirez, of Linda, of everyone. He saw their eyes. He could feel what they were thinking. Stop! Mike shouted again as they got close to the car. I need to stop the bleeding. Put him on the ground. What? We need to. He's losing too much blood, Hector. Mike shouted as he looked into Hector's eyes, who seemed to realize in that moment that it was worse than he thought, because the eyes of Mike were just too telling. If we put him in the car, he dies on the way there. Mike shouted, and then turned around and ran to his own car and pulled out a big medical bag from it. Opening it, and it was full with medical equipment. IVs, scalpel and sterile containers, a whole bunch of different bandages, even a small oxygen tank was in there. But Hector still didn't seem to understand what was happening or what Mike was saying. But when Mike cut off James's clothes, when he revealed his upper body and Hector's gaze fell on it, he froze. The amount of blood that was gushing out of James was so much that it seemed impossible. He saw the 3 bullet wounds, one near the heart, one in the lower abdomen, and the third one just under James' right breast. What he was seeing was death. There was no doubt about it. There was no way of him surviving it. It was just too much blood, too much to be able to recover from. Hector! Mike shouted, pulling him out from his thoughts. The 4, put it into his vein on his arm. Mike said as he reached out the 4 line and the needle toward Hector, but he was just too frozen. He was just looking helplessly back at Mike. I'm here. Linda's voice suddenly joined in as she knelt down, grabbed the line, and immediately put it into James' arm. Tell me what I need to do. The fear was heard in her voice. Not just that, but her whole being was shaking, but she knew that if James died right there, it would mean the end. The end of what they have worked for. Chapter 4:13, Slipping. Oh, you're back. What is this? James asked as he still could not piece the fragments together, still could not decide whether anything was truly happening at all. Well, you're dying, aren't you? Lucian asked, though it sounded like that he was stating something obvious. I killed myself. You didn't. How would you know that? You're just a part of my own mind. That is exactly why I know it. Lucian replied as he locked eyes with Joseph. You didn't shoot yourself, and Hector didn't die. He did not break eye contact. You got shot, you fell to the ground, and you started bleeding out, and that is when your mind created your own reality to escape what was actually happening, which is a bit crazy when you think about it, isn't it? You created this hallucination where Hector died, where you shot his dead body, and then ended yourself. Lucian shook his head, but then a smile appeared on his face. You are truly insane, James. No. James whispered at first as he was trying to convince himself. No, that is not true. I remember it. I remember everything. And that is exactly the problem. You remember what your mind wants you to remember, not what actually happened. Joseph took a step back, then another, his shoes scraping against nothingness, yet somehow still making a sound that echoed too loudly in the empty space around them. You're lying, he said. You have to be lying. Because if you are not, then what the hell is this? What is all of this? This, Lucian gesturing vaguely at the endless fog, at the darkness that seemed to pulse with Joseph's own thoughts, is what your mind built to protect you from the truth. And what truth is that? That you are not dead, Lucian said. Not yet. Crazy, right? It was not just crazy. It was something that James actually understood deep down, yet he still could not bring himself to face it fully. Linda had called him, and that part was real. It actually happened. She had been screaming through the phone, telling him that a woman was there to kill him, and that woman was not Olivia, it was Sophia. But James never had time to react, never had time to defend himself, never even had a single second to process what he was hearing, because Sophia didn't wait and fired her gun. That was what Linda heard on the other end of the call, the gunshots followed by the sound of the phone hitting the ground, and then the heavier sound of James' body collapsing right after it. He had been shot, and blood immediately started gushing out of his gunshot wounds, and that was the exact moment his mind broke away from reality. That was the moment it created something else, something false, an illusion where everything happened differently. In that version, Hector saved him, but he died in the process. And maybe that was the worst part of all, because it was not random, it was not meaningless, it was chosen. Hector was the one who died for a reason. Because James felt like Hector was the pillar of the family, the one people believed in, the one they followed without question, and James could feel himself losing that position, losing control, losing importance, and his mind searched for a solution that would remove that conflict entirely. So it gave him one. It made Hector the one who died, and after it was followed by the inevitable end of James himself. Because in the end, it was not enough for Hector to die. James had to die too. Because living with the truth, living with the realization that a part of him wanted Hector gone, that he had created a reality where Hector died in his place, was something he could never accept. So his mind chose the only escape it could find. If he died as well, then there would be nothing left to face. Lucian said it right after all, or at least that was what it felt like to James in that moment. But even that was not fully accurate, because it was not Lucian speaking, it was James' own mind constructing him, shaping him into a voice that could deliver the truth. It was James talking to himself, through a version of Lucian that only existed inside his collapsing perception of reality. James was telling himself that he was breaking apart, that he was slowly following a path that led straight into madness. And it all happened because of the combination of medications, the constant pain and torment, the fragmented memories looping over and over again, the overwhelming worry about the family and what would happen next, and the weight of everything he had done up until this point. All of it was mixing together. Everything was collapsing into one single point of pressure. The darkness, Lucian, the memories, the fear, even the people he thought he knew. All of it blending together until nothing felt real anymore, and nothing felt stable enough to hold on to. He was falling apart, not slowly, not gently, but completely, like something inside him was cracking in multiple places at once, unable to support itself any longer. And more than that, he was not just breaking. He was dying for real this time, not inside his head, not in a constructed reality, but they were trying to pull him back. Linda, Mike, and now even Ramirez were there, trying their best to stop the bleeding, to pull James back. They were all trying to save the person who had, in one way or another, given each of them a new purpose in their lives, even if that purpose had been built through violence, through fear, through blood. He had changed all of them in ways they could not undo, and now they were trying to return that impact, trying to pull him back from the edge he was falling over. But his body kept betraying him. James was slipping away, and if they did not pull him back right now, there would be nothing left to save it all. The angel of death was dying, and with him his legacy. Chapter 414. Truly a new era. Was this really the right move, William? Yes. Sophia was mentally unprepared for what she had witnessed, and we broke her even more. The princess, the queen, the empress of the underworld was broken by seeing families killed, by witnessing James turn into something different from what she believed in. And well, we used it to make her kill him. But he didn't die. The voice came again. James is alive. Multiple agents reported it to me who are with Linda. He is on the verge of death, but he can still survive it. More so now, Hector and the others will start a war. A war in the middle of a natural catastrophe. This timing is off, William. It can bring our end. Our end. William laughed. This is the new start. We can build ourselves up even more, grab the hope of the people, and for that road James needs to die. We can't allow somebody to rule and behave like a little king, nor anybody else. There was silence for a bit in the Oval Office. The other man didn't speak, but he knew he needed to ask the question. What should we do then? We do how we planned it. William said as he drank a bit of whiskey. We are going to arrest everybody who worked with James. Linda, Benjamin, Thomas, Stephen, all of them. If they aren't willing to give up, then kill them. William looked at the man. And of course, call up the general and destroy the Bellini family. What are we going to tell the public? The man asked again. That a criminal organization tried to use the catastrophe to gain more wealth, to use everything in their possession to make more money while the people were suffering, and we need to chop their heads down. Easy and simple. But we planned it for next month. The man's voice came again. This is too much, and the people will question us for why we are doing it right now. In the middle of a catastrophe, William, this will turn out bad. I do not care. William's voice came. I am the president of this nation, and nobody can rule their own little world. Send the special forces and arrest all of them, and if they refuse, then kill them. That is my order. William's voice was strange. Like if he got poisoned by something. Like if he was acting out of his own personal will, because all of this plan was a mess, more so a destruction of his own rule and what they had built up. What are you going to do? The man asked, his voice low and full of hesitation about the order that William gave. In 2 hours I'm going to give a speech at the hospital that got damaged. I will give hope to the people. So do your job, Sebastian. Now leave. Well, he left. He didn't argue a single bit because Sebastian knew there was no sense in it, that something happened to William. Maybe he lost his mind, but one thing was sure. Sebastian was ready to notify somebody important about it all. So he made the call. Fuck, how can William be this dumb? Good question, but we both know this was his plan from the beginning. But it got out of control, and James gained much more power than he thought he would. We both saw the drug trading agency plan. Yeah, but it already destroyed half of the country. Then came the tsunami, and he is doing all of this right now? When James could bring in a lot of money. Oh my God, what do you want to do, Darvik? Gabriel, the well-trusted commander of the Darvik forces, asked because, well, it was obvious they needed to do something. Because James was a piggy bank to them, and they needed his money. Well, if I do something. Darvik began slowly, a faint smile spreading across his face as he leaned back into the leather chair. James is going to owe me. Greatly after this. Maybe $1 billion is enough? He asked while glancing toward Gabriel. $8 billion to save them? To save him. Darvik corrected him. And honestly, I think that is a fair deal. He crossed one leg over the other. It is pocket change in the long run. The Bellini network will move hundreds of millions constantly. $1 billion will mean nothing if William disappears. Wait. He stared at Darvik. You want to kill William? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Gabriel nearly rose from his chair in disbelief, staring at the man calmly eating a sandwich while discussing the assassination of one of the most protected political leaders on the planet. You want to assassinate the president of a sovereign nation to save a mafia family? Darvik slowly wiped his fingers with a napkin before finally looking up. No. His voice remained calm. I want to remove a corrupt president who turned his own nation into a private kingdom. William stole billions. He preached sacrifice while his ministers bought mansions overseas. He cut food programs during the Northern Famine. He privatized emergency medicine contracts during the influenza crisis. He allowed entire industrial districts to collapse because his allies profited from reconstruction afterward. Darvik's eyes sharpened. Do you know how many people died while he gave speeches about patriotism? Gabriel did not answer. We fought wars to stop men like him. Darvik continued. We buried soldiers. Because of leaders like him. Meanwhile, he sat in luxury while entire cities starved. He leaned forward slightly. And now? Now he wants to eliminate James because James became too powerful. Governments love pretending morality matters until economies collapse. He stood up and walked toward the window overlooking the dark city. You know what the funny part is? Darvik asked quietly. James is probably better for this country than William ever was. That sounds insane. Does it? Darvik turned toward him again. Unemployment under our administration is below 4%. Energy infrastructure is functioning. Nobody is starving. Every family receives electricity, water, and food access. His voice became colder. William had decades and still failed to give his people stability. So your solution is what? A puppet government? Gabriel asked. No. Darvik shook his head. A controllable government. There is a difference. Darvik walked back toward the table. A puppet obeys every command. A controllable government simply understands mutual interests. He tapped the desk once. And right now, our interests align perfectly with James Bellini. The sheer scale of what Darvik was suggesting became suffocating. They had overthrown cartels before, assassinated militia leaders, eliminated dictators in unstable regions. But assassinating the sitting president of a developed allied nation during a national catastrophe? That was not covert warfare anymore. That was the beginning of geopolitical destabilization. And somehow, Darvik sounded completely prepared for it. Wait, Gabriel muttered. You have been planning this. Darvik smiled slightly. Not planning. He corrected. Preparing. But here is the beautiful part. Darvik continued. Under national emergency succession laws, if William dies, the acting authority temporarily falls to Linda. Gabriel immediately looked at him. And Linda already works with us. Exactly. Darvik spread his hands slightly. No military coup. No constitutional collapse. No tanks in the streets. The public sees lawful succession during a tragedy. Stability. You are insane. No. Darvik answered calmly. I am realistic. Activate every embedded asset we have. Sleeper agents, political contacts, intelligence operatives. I want William removed along with every senior official still loyal to him. Gabriel hesitated. Darvik, this could trigger international war. The Union president met with me 2 days ago. Darvik interrupted. He gave full unofficial support. He what? The earthquake changed everything. Logistics are crippled. Military mobilization is crippled. Economies are collapsing. Nobody can afford open war right now. He folded his arms. Even if our involvement becomes public, the Union will politically shield us. And if retaliation comes, then the Union crosses the border with us. The silence afterward felt heavy, not because Gabriel doubted him anymore, but because he realized Darvik was telling the truth. This was no longer an assassination. It was a coordinated geopolitical restructuring hidden beneath the chaos of a national disaster. This is the perfect moment to reshape power. He said quietly, this is truly a new era, and it is all thanks to James Bellini.